At natatandaan nyo pa ba ang mga celebrity death hoax na ito? Patay na raw si Chris Aquino, si Kuya Kim, si Gary Valenciano, si Doc Willie Ong at si Jaime Fabregas. At maging ang death hoax ni Celine Dion, kumalat rin sa ating mga social media feed. Marami pang ibang example niyan. Pero ang pinakamabigat ay maraming disinformation campaign na layuning guluhin ang ating lipunan. Sa ating bansa na mayroong 87 million internet and social media users, tinatayang 70% ang nakabasa na o nakapanood na ng political fake news. Sa survey naman ng social weather stations, lumalabas na 51% ng mga Pilipino ang hindi kayang tukuhin kung fake news ang kanilang nababasa o napapanood. Mabigat ang implikasyon nito. Ang propaganda, maling impormasyon at pekeng balita ay maaaring magresulta upang mabawasan ang tiwala ng taong bayan sa mga demokratikong proseso. Kaya mahalaga ang pagpapatibay ng mga safeguards sa pamamagitan ng lehislasyon ng mga batas na magbabalanse sa karapatan ng malayang pamamahayag at pagbabantay sa fake news. Yan ang paraan upang supilin ng mga bad actors na layuning manggulo sa ating bansa. Anumang impormasyon, mabilis na maa-access sa pamamagitan ng internet at social media. Bilis rin at komportable sa online marketplace. Trabaho ba ang kailangan mo? Marami ring online job postings. Pero ang problema, mayroong mga bad actors na nagkalat sa internet. Kung di ka maingat, mabibiktima ka ng online seller na scammer. Ang binili mong cellphone, bato pala ang laman.
Bato! Mami Eden, bato! Mami Eden, bato ang laman! Nandiyan na yung pera ko, Mami Eden!
Ang online job application mo, elaborate phishing scam pala para sa identity theft. At ang news na binasa at pinanonood mo ay maaaring disinformation campaign o fake news. Tingnan nyo lamang ang mga bidyong ito na nagsisirculate sa social media kung saan sinasabing ang Luzon kasama ang Palawan ay dati umanong teritoryo ng China. At natatandaan nyo pa ba ang mga celebrity death hoax na ito? Patay na raw si Chris Aquino, si Kuya Kim, si Gary Valenciano, si Doc Willie Ong at si Jaime Fabregas. At maging ang death hoax ni Celine Dion, kumalat rin sa ating mga social media feed. Marami pang ibang example niyan. Pero ang pinakamabigat ay maraming disinformation campaign na layuning guluhin ang ating lipunan. Sa ating bansa na mayroong 87 million internet and social media users, tinatayang 70% ang nakabasa na o nakapanood na ng political fake news. Sa survey naman ng social weather stations, lumalabas na 51% ng mga Pilipino ang hindi kayang tukuhin kung fake news ang kanilang nababasa o napapanood. Mabigat ang implikasyon nito. Ang propaganda, maling impormasyon at pekeng balita ay maaaring magresulta upang mabawasan ang tiwala ng taong bayan sa mga demokratikong proseso. Kaya mahalaga ang pagpapatibay ng mga safeguards sa pamamagitan ng lehislasyon ng mga batas na magbabalanse sa karapatan ng malayang pamamahayag at pagbabantay sa fake news. Yan ang paraan upang supilin ng mga bad actors na layuning manggulo sa ating bansa. Anumang impormasyon, mabilis na maa-access sa pamamagitan ng internet at social media. Bilis rin at komportable sa online marketplace. Trabaho ba ang kailangan mo? Marami ring online job postings. Pero ang problema, mayroong mga bad actors na nagkalat sa internet. Kung di ka maingat, mabibiktima ka ng online seller na scammer. Ang binili mong cellphone, bato pala ang laman.
Bato! Mami Eden, bato! Mami Eden, bato ang laman! Nandiyan na yung pera ko, Mami Eden!
ang online job application mo. Elaborate phishing scam pala para sa identity theft. At ang news na binasa at pinanonood mo ay maaaring disinformation campaign o fake news. Tingnan nyo lamang ang mga bidyong ito na nagsisirculate sa social media kung saan sinasabing ang Luzon kasama ang Palawan ay dati umanong teritoryo ng China. At natatandaan nyo pa ba ang mga celebrity death hoax na ito? Patay na raw si Chris Aquino, si Kuya Kim, si Gary Valenciano, si Doc Willie Ong at si Jaime Fabregas. At maging ang death hoax ni Celine Dion, kumalat rin sa ating mga social media feed. Marami pang ibang example niyan. Pero ang pinakamabigat ay maraming disinformation campaign na layuning guluhin ang ating lipunan. Sa ating bansa na mayroong 87 million internet and social media users, tinatayang 70% ang nakabasa na o nakapanood na ng political fake news. Sa survey naman ng social weather stations, lumalabas na 51% ng mga Pilipino ang hindi kayang tukuhin kung fake news ang kanilang nababasa o napapanood. Mabigat ang implikasyon nito. Ang propaganda, maling impormasyon at peking balita ay maaaring magresulta upang mabawasan ang tiwala ng taong bayan sa mga demokratikong proseso. Kaya mahalaga ang pagpapatibay ng mga safeguards sa pamamagitan ng lehislasyon ng mga batas na magbabalanse sa karapatan ng malayang pamamahayag at pagbabantay sa fake news. Yan ang paraan upang supilin ng mga bad actors na layuning manggulo sa ating bansa. Anumang impormasyon, mabilis na maa-access sa pamamagitan ng internet at social media. Bilis rin at komportable sa online marketplace. Trabaho ba ang kailangan mo? Marami ring online job postings. Pero ang problema, mayroong mga bad actors na nagkalat sa internet. Kung di ka maingat, mabibiktima ka ng online seller na scammer. Ang binili mong cellphone, bato pala ang laman.
Bato! Ma'am Eden, bato! Ma'am Eden, bato ang laman! Nandun na yung pera ko, Ma'am Eden!
Ang online job application mo. Elaborate phishing scam pala para sa identity theft. At ang news na binasa at pinanonood mo ay maaaring disinformation campaign o fake news. Tingnan nyo lamang ang mga bidyong ito na nagsisirculate sa social media kung saan sinasabing ang Luzon kasama ang
May
Palawan
request everyone
ay
to
dati
please
umanong
take their seats.
teritoryo ng China.
We'll start in a few minutes. To all those resource persons that have been invited, please take the front seats. Okay na. The meeting of the Tri-Committee is hereby resumed. May we call on Representative Franz Castro for the prayer. All rise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let us feel the presence of our Almighty God. We come together from many faiths, tradition, and paths, united in our longing for clarity, compassion, and peace. In a time clouded by confusion, falsehood, and division, guide our hearts toward honesty and understanding. Help us listen with empathy, speak with integrity, and seek truth with humility. Grant us the wisdom to discern what uplifts and unites, and the courage to challenge what misleads and harms. May we be instruments of light in the midst of shadows, and builders of bridges in fractured world. Together, may our shared values lead us toward peace, respect, and unity. This we ask in your mighty name. Amen.
Please remain standing for the national anthem.
maligayang magiliw. Perlas ng singanganan, hanap ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Upang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw. May dilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng luwalhatit pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please take your seats. The first item on the agenda is the reading and approval of the minutes of the March 21 TRICOM meeting. Any motion from the members?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Congressman Ako.
may I respectfully move that we dispense with the reading of the minutes of the meeting and approval of same, which was held on March 21, 2025. So move, Mr. Chair.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. Good morning to everyone,
Morning.
to my co-chairs, to the resource persons, members of the committee. We're gathered here today to continue our hearing on the critical issue of fake news, disinformation, and misinformation. This is the fourth hearing of the TRICOM, and as we convene, we find ourselves at a crucial juncture where digital landscape continues to evolve rapidly, presenting both challenges and opportunities for communication and information dissemination. The rapid evolution of technology and the rise of digital communication platforms have transformed the way we consume information. While these advancements have brought numerous benefits, they have also facilitated the spread of false narratives, manipulated truths, and an increasingly polarized public discourse. Today, we confront the daunting challenge of safeguarding our democracy and the integrity of our information ecosystem. Disinformation campaigns and the proliferation of fake news not only mislead citizens, but they also undermine trust in our institutions, weaponize public opinion, and threaten the very foundations of our democratic processes. Lalong-lalo na po sa panahong ito na kung saan ay naglipa na ang mga fake news laban sa mga tumatabo ngayong eleksyon. Nakakalungkot isipin na sa pagpapakalat ng mga maling impormasyon, hindi lang ang taong kanilang sinisiraan ang apektado, ngunit pati na rin ang ating bansa. Dapat tayo maging mapanuri. Huwag nating ipagwalang bala at bagkus labanan ang mga ganitong maling gawain. Together, we can confront the challenges posed by fake news and disinformation, ensuring a healthier public discourse. At sa hearing nito, we will continue our exploration of the multidimensional aspects of this crisis, examining the roles of social media platforms, the impact of algorithmic amplification, and the psychological mechanisms that make individuals susceptible to false information. We invited and will hear from experts, advocates, and those on the front lines of combating this misinformation epidemic, as well as those who have been adversely affected by its far-reaching consequences. Our goal for today is not simply to identify the problems, but to forge a path forward, developing actionable strategies for education, policy reform, and technology that can counter these threats. We owe it to ourselves, to the future generations, and to the principles of truth and integrity upon which our society is built. At gaya po ng sinabi ko nung nakaraang pagdinig ng TRICOM, as we engage with our witnesses and panelists today, I urge each and every one of us to approach this inquiry with open minds and collaborative spirit. It is only through this kind of thoughtful dialogue and a concerted effort that we can uphold the integrity of information and empower individuals to become discerning consumer of news. I hope everybody will engage thoughtfully and openly as we delve into this pressing issue that not only threatens our present but also shapes our collective future. Let us work together to reclaim the narrative, restore trust, and uphold the values that define us. Maraming salamat po sa lahat. May I now call the COMSEC to acknowledge the presence of the members of the committee and colleagues in Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone, Your Honors. For today's meeting, in attendance are the following members: Honorable Romeo Acop, Honorable Joseph Stephen Caraps Paduano, Honorable Salvador Pleito, Honorable Francisco Pablo Ortega V, Honorable Franz Castro. Also in attendance online, we have Honorable Jordan Jesus Romualdo, Honorable Edward Vera Perez Maceda, Honorable Marie Bernadette Escudero, Honorable Zia Alonto Adiong, Honorable Ed Christopher Go, Honorable Ambrosio Cruz, Honorable Edgar M. Chato, Honorable Raul Buboy Tupas, Honorable Ching Bernos, Honorable Sunny S.L. Lagon, and Honorable Celso Resencia. For today's meeting, Your Honors, we're happy to have with us the following resource persons. From the Anti-Money Laundering Council, we have Attorney Patrick Arnold Tetanco, the Legal Officer of Investigation and Enforcement Department. And he's accompanying Attorney Adrian Arpon, the Deputy Director. From the Bureau of Internal Revenue, we have Attorney Tobias Gavin Arcilia, the Action Attorney for Legal and Legislative Division. From the Commission on Elections, we have Director John Rex Laudanco, the Director for Education and Information Department. And he's accompanied by Attorney Maria Lourdes Fogoso Alcain. From the Department of Justice, we have State Counsel Christian Bautista. From the National Bureau of Investigation, we have Ms. Agrifina de la Cruz, the Assistant Chief of LS Legislative Unit. From the National Telecommunications Commission, we have Attorney Kathleen J. Luz Egipto, the Chief for Consumer Welfare and Prosecution Division. From the Philippine Coast Guard, we have Commodore J. Tariela, the Commander, PCG WPS Transparency Group, and Commodore Nelson J. Timbang, the Deputy Chief. From the Philippine National Police, we have Police Brigadier General Bernardo Yang, the Acting Director of the Anti-Cybercrime Group. We also have invited several social media platforms. Your Honors, we have in attendance Director Rafael Frankel from Meta and Mr. Rob Abrams. From the broadcast industry, we have Attorney Rudolph Hularbal, the legal counsel for the kapisanan ng mga broadcasters sa Pilipinas, and Attorney Mark Tolentino. From the MBC Media Group, or the Manila Broadcasting Company, we have Attorney Rina Seco, the counsel for MBC. In attendance also are Mr. Miko David, President of the Digital Marketing Association of the Philippines, Mr. Gerardo Sandoval, Vice President of the Social Weather Station, Mr. John Hart Alawigan from the Press 1 PH, and Ms. Lei Jensen San Diego. From civil society organization, from Scamwatch Philippines, we have Mr. Josel de Guzman. And some social media personalities we have in attendance, Ms. Grisette Laureata Chu, Ms. Elizabeth Joy Cruz, or Ms. Joy de Vivre, Attorney Rose Beatrix Trixie Cruz Angeles, Dr. Ethel Pineda Garcia, Mr. Manuel Mata, Dr. Richard Tesoro Mata, Mr. Elijah San Fernando, Ms. Suzanne Batalla, Attorney Glenn Chong, Ms. Maria Florinda Espenilla Duque, Mr. Claro Ganak, Mr. Alvin Montero, Mr. Jonathan Morales, Ms. Vivian Zapata Rodriguez, and Mr. Darwin Salceda. That's all, Your Honors. Thank you.
Thank you, Comsec. As per our House rules, all resource persons must take their oath, but for those who have taken their oath already during the last hearing, you need not to. But for those who are appearing for the first time on this committee hearing, please rise for you to take the oath. Comsec, please administer the oath.
Please rise and raise your right hand. And please respond with I do. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this inquiry?
I do.
Thank you. Please take your seat.
For the opportunity to be here today. We look forward to talking about our content policies, how we moderate content on our platform, and I know there's a specific emphasis today on how we treat misinformation, and I'm happy to walk the committee through that. I just want to also say that we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We always wanted to be here. We absolutely appreciate the responsibility that Meta has in the Philippines. We know how important and essential our services are to the people, communities, government, and businesses of Philippines. We're very proud of the services that we provide in Philippines and the really wonderful relationship that Meta and the Philippine people have. We're proud of the support that we provide to Philippine businesses, in particular micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And so it's really an honor and a privilege to be here today. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we do have a presentation. And I think that will serve really as my opening statement. And if we could therefore proceed to that, I'd be happy to walk the committee through our presentation, and then we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, sir.
But before that, may I acknowledge the presence? Oh, is he present or is he in the holding room? He's on the holding room. Later, we'll acknowledge him. Okay. May I acknowledge the presence of Honorable Arlene Brosas? Okay, please proceed, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the committee, this is a briefing on Meta's content policies and our enforcement, and like I said, with a particular emphasis on how we treat misinformation. Next slide, please. To begin with, I just want to emphasize some of the investments that Meta has made in the Philippines. Since 2017, we have been heavily involved in promoting digital literacy and digital entrepreneurship in the Philippines. We have a project called Digital Tayo, which we have engaged in with the DICT, the Department of Education, DSWD, and a number of international and local non-governmental organizations in order to train Filipino people, including youth, on digital literacy. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned in your opening statement the importance of empowering Filipino people to understand how to interact with and then digest information in this digital ecosystem. And so this is the point of this entire program. And through this program, we have trained over 6.5 million Filipinos in digital literacy, and we are now incorporating into that program elements on AI as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The other emphasis we've had here in terms of our training programs has been on digital entrepreneurship. And our digital entrepreneurship training has really been focused on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the Philippines. We give them tools and training programs to upskill and understand how they can better perform in the digital economy. We have worked in this regard with DTI, BSP, PCW, DSWD, DA, a number of NGOs. And in this program, we've trained over 60,000 micro, small, medium-sized enterprises in the Philippines since 2017. We're very proud of that work as well. And again, we are now incorporating generative AI and AI into those skills and upgrades. Next slide, please. An area where we have made significant investments in Philippines is in digital infrastructure connectivity. These are mainly the subsea cable network, which we have built to connect Philippines both back to North America and further in other places in the Asia-Pacific region. There are 4 main subsea cables that Meta is involved in that touch in the Philippines. The first is the Pacific Light Cable Network. This came online last year. Indeed, there's a picture of myself at the honor of launching the PLCN with President Marcos a year ago. And like many of our other subsea cables, this provides a lot of digital connectivity and infrastructure to the Filipino people. We also have the Jupiter cable system that connects the Philippines with Japan and the United States. This was completed in 2022. We have our Apricot system, which will connect Philippines with Taiwan, Japan, Guam, Indonesia, and Singapore when that's completed. And we also have our Bifrost cable system, and this is going to connect, again, Singapore with Philippines to Singapore, Indonesia, Guam, and the United States, and again, when that's completed. And so through these cable projects, the best estimates are that this is going to produce an additional $34 billion of GDP in the Philippines and can create more than 380,000 jobs, on top of just the tremendous benefits that'll bring to Philippines who are trying to access the internet all over the country. Finally, I want to mention our most recent investments in Philippines, and this is really around AI. Only over the weekend, this is next slide, please. Meta launched our Llama 4 model, which is the most advanced, by many metrics, open source AI, generative AI model that's ever been released. And there's two main parts to these investments. In terms of Llama 4, what this means is that as an open source model, this large language model is free for people to use. Researchers, developers, academics, engineers, companies, they are free to download our Llama 4 model and use it so that they can create their own AI tools and their own AI systems. And this is absolutely true the world in the Philippines. And for this release, so for Llama 4, it's worth noting that this Llama 4 model specifically has capabilities in Tagalog, in Philippines local language. This was a significant investment of resources in Meta's part to make this available and capable in local language here in Philippines. But we recognize that this was a very strategic investment for us. Philippines is a wonderful market for Meta. We have a very vibrant and substantial community here, and we believe in our AI tools being tools of economic empowerment for the people of the Philippines, and that's why we invested these resources in making this most advanced open source model available in Tagalog. We're very proud of that investment. The second part is Meta AI, which is our own generative AI chatbot, which is embedded inside Meta's services like Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And this is also available in Tagalog. And Filipino people have been able to use this since October. And Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I just want to emphasize this point again. All of these services are being rolled out in Philippines in local language for free, for the Philippines people to use, and for the economic benefit and further educational advancement of the Philippines people in this digital age where generative AI and AI capabilities are going to be so important for the future and for the future of digital economic growth and economic growth in general. I just wanted to mention those investments that we make in the Philippines before we got to the meat of the topic today, as just a point to show how important of a country Philippines is for Meta, how seriously we take our responsibilities here, and how proud we are of the engagement that we do with Philippines communities, the communications tools we provide free of service to hundreds of millions of Filipinos, and to the Philippine businesses for their economic growth, and indeed to the government. And we all know, I think, that this is being live streamed, this hearing, on our services, and we're proud of that. We're very proud of the services that Meta provides also for the government of the Philippines and the elected representatives of the Philippines to reach their constituents. So now turning to the meat of the matter in terms of our content policies and how we moderate misinformation. If you could, next slide, please. The first and most important place to start is with our community standards. Meta has a single global set of community standards that govern how we moderate content and what is allowed on our platforms everywhere around the world. As you might imagine, it is difficult sometimes to balance the goals we seek to achieve in our community standards, which are to protect and encourage freedom of expression, connection, but also, on the other hand, make sure that this is a safe, that our platforms are safe, and that they're places that people want to be. We want, obviously, for all the people that are using our services and our platforms to have positive experiences. That's extremely important to us. And so that means doing the very difficult work of balancing freedom of expression, the ability for people to have their voice, with community safety. As it is probably clear, that comes with some real trade-offs and some difficult questions that we have to answer sometimes about where we draw lines on what kind of content we allow and what kind of content we prohibit. And this is also very, very different in some cases, depending on cultural context, depending on legal context, right? Certainly, certain types of content that might be viewed as totally fine and legitimate in places in Europe might not be viewed as totally fine and legitimate in Philippines, and vice versa, right? And so when we draw up our global standards, we have to balance all those different perspectives from around the world and do the best we can to balance that into a set of rules that we can globally implement for a community of people that use our services at the range of more than 3.2 billion people every single day. Right, and so that's the kind of task that's before us when we try to think of how we both develop our community standards and then go ahead and enforce and implement our community standards. Next slide, please. This slide is really about how we enforce them. There's a few different ways that we enforce our community standards, and that revolves user reports, human review on behalf of, that we under a single piece of content on Facebook, Instagram, and the services that we provide has the ability for a user to report it to us as a potential violation of our policies, right? So that's a really important piece to note there right now, that any content that anyone sees on Facebook can be reported to us. And we do the best we can to look at those user reports and weigh and check them against our community standards. The next is we have human review by our own internal people, right? And by a number of 40,000 people around the globe that are reviewing content that's reported by users and that also we flag ourselves proactively. The people that review this content are looking at content that can be, in some cases, rather easy to make decisions on. If you're talking about content that is involving terrorism, graphic violence, child exploitative imagery, those kinds of things, you can get to decisions pretty quickly and pretty easily about taking those down. When you're talking about content that is more political speech in nature and is a little more blurry in terms of a certain nuance, then we're talking about content that really needs a larger and more specific focus, and we really try and make sure that there are people reviewing those that are very highly trained in our policies, and also, of course, the local context of the content and where it's coming from and where it's being delivered to. The same type of speech in one country, as I mentioned before, could be benign, but in the context of a different country and a different situation, it might be malevolent, right? And so we balance those very clearly. by having humans review content that is flagged by different sources. And the kind of way that we really moderate content at real scale, because again, we're talking about billions of pieces of content every day, is by artificial intelligence and the machine learning that we've developed over many, many years. People now look at Meta as an artificial intelligence company, but the truth is that we have been an artificial intelligence company for many, many years already. And one of the ways that we've used artificial intelligence for a long time now is in order to moderate content at scale. And so what we do is we train what we call classifiers to look at our community standards and look at the content that's posted on our platforms and weigh those pieces of content against our community standards. And that's how we tend to moderate content really at scale. And like I said, for things like imagery that's clearly graphically violent or clearly includes terrorism content or child exploitative imagery, those artificial intelligence systems are very effective and work very well to proactively remove content that can be dangerous and illegal in many countries around the world. And so we have these three ways that we moderate content, right? We have the artificial intelligence that's operating in scale and very much again, and I want to stress this, in local language, in Tagalog. It absolutely has that capability. And then we have a series of, 40,000 people around the world that are humans that are trained in our community standards, and then we also rely on user reports. And it's those three main pillars that help us enforce our community standards. Next slide, please. Now, it's also important to recognize that there are a couple different ways you can moderate content. You can look at individual pieces of content, and that's very important, especially when it comes to user reports and anything that our machine tools are catching. But there's also the ways that we can look at disrupting entire networks of abusive actors, right? And so what we might look at when we talk about abusive networks are networks of people that are distributing child exploitative imagery or, like I said, terrorism content. Or more recently, we've looked at scam networks, right? We've looked at misinformation and disinformation networks. And in these cases, what you're talking about are a group of people that are intentionally coordinating their behavior to violate our policies. Often, in many cases, doing so by lying about who they are or being dishonest about who they are in the process, right? And so when we look and we see and we find evidence of these types of abusive networks, we have special policies in place that can also remove content at the network scale, right? And so when you think about that, then you're looking at removing content not just on a piece-by-piece basis, not just on a page-by-page or profile basis, but in a series of accounts, right? And so if you're talking about, examples where we might see a few hundred accounts or a few thousand accounts engaged in coordinated abuse of our platforms, then you're looking at the potential to remove all in one swoop, thousands or even sometimes hundreds of thousands, millions of pieces of individual content, right? And that's an incredibly effective tool that we use against criminal networks and also in cases where we find there to be specific misinformation, disinformation campaign and foreign interference networks. At this stage, before I get to the next part about some of that work, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Rob Abrams from our law enforcement team. He's going to specifically talk about some of the work that we do in collaboration with Philippines law enforcement and the very close relationship that we have with them. And then I'll continue. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Thank you, Rafi. So I want to talk a little bit in a bit more depth, but not with a level of granularity that would afford our adversaries any sort of unnecessary insight into the obstacles that we put up. But I want to talk in a little bit more depth about the network disruptions that we do. They're very strategic in in nature. They're not merely about scale and taking down, 10,000 accounts at one time. They're about removing a false web of bona fides that these criminals go to great lengths to create so that they can contact people unwittingly by seemingly being friends of friends or having other sorts of connections. A lot of the work we do, especially here in the Philippines, is informed by the signal sharing and by the data requests we get from agencies like NBI, from the Office of Cybercrime, from CICC, from the Anti-Cybercrime Group at the PNP. And others. So a lot of the work that we've been able to do, I say this under oath, and I say this with a lot of passion. The Philippines has been seriously global leaders when it comes to helping us fight forced criminality and these scam centers, formerly known as POGOs, if you like, that operate here in the Philippines, target not only Filipinos, but are engaged in human trafficking, forced criminality, and are a large part of the scam and increasingly misinformation ecosystem that, again, have a big role here. I think there's one advantage that I'd like to point out, and I know it sounds perhaps a bit counterintuitive. Here in the Philippines, we know that scam centers operate, but we also know that law enforcement and the government here takes them very seriously. There are geopolitical black holes that we all know of, where law enforcement has no appetite to actually combat this. But because we have such a good relationship with PNP office, anti-cyber ACG, with the NBI, with various task forces, we are able to ingest signal regularly. I can say again, under oath, there's probably not a day that goes by where I'm not in contact with a member of Philippines law enforcement. So with that, and I'm quite certain I'll receive some follow-up questions and as we go forward. With that, I'll turn back over to Rafi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Rob. And it was just worth noting that Rob himself is a former member of the FBI, and so takes his law enforcement work very seriously.
Just correction for the record, sir.
Sorry.
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security Department. Forgive me. So I would just also note that when we're talking about some of these disruptions, what we've seen also recently, and Rob alluded to this, is the rise of scam centers, right? And we've worked on this very, very closely over the past couple of years, both internally with Meta and also with our partners in law enforcement, with the PNP and other members of the Philippines law enforcement that Rob mentioned. It's really worth noting that I think it's kind of clear at this point that what we see are these transnational criminal syndicates that are operating in a couple different countries around Southeast Asia and indeed globally. And they engage in forced criminality, human trafficking, and then of course, the real horrible element of this is that not only are people forcibly trafficked to these locations, but then they're forced to engage in further crime and scams against other people. And so we've worked extremely hard to take down these networks on our platform to the point where by the end of 2024, we had removed and deleted over 2 million accounts that came from these organized criminal scam centers in Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, the UAE, and indeed a few here in the Philippines as well. Thanks very much to our collaboration with Philippines law enforcement.
I'd also like to just add for the record, the Filipino law enforcement community, as well as the BICAM in general, were among the first globally to flag this as a national security threat. So that has really sort of stepped up the tempo of our work and the investments we're doing around this work. So I just want to publicly acknowledge the law enforcement agencies, the military agencies, the regulatory agencies, and indeed members of the BICAM, who have been among the world leaders in flagging this not only as an economic threat to individual Filipinos, but as a national security threat here in the Philippines and globally. Of course, I don't want to get too granular on that, but the law enforcement agencies, and I'm sure your good self, Mr. Chair, are aware of exactly what I'm speaking of. If there are further, more granular conversations that you'd like to have around that, Mr. Chair, I, of course, would be honored to do that in executive session. And we have a great relationship with your law enforcement agencies and CICC. We held a conference in November in Bangkok, largely closed door and held under Chatham House rules. Filipino law enforcement were among sort of the flagship entities that were there. NBI spoke, PNP spoke, The PNP attaché in Bangkok spoke. He's been a fantastic advocate and source of trend sharing. So I just want to express gratitude for helping shape the narrative on how serious of a threat this is to the global infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And if we can go to the next slide, I'd like to address how we specifically deal with misinformation on our platforms. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I mentioned earlier how there are some of our community standards which are actually fairly easy to enforce. The bans on terrorism, child exploitative imagery, these kinds of things, graphic violence in some cases. Then there are topics that are much more difficult, right, and much more highly nuanced and very contextual. And misinformation tends to be, not always, but tends to be more in that second bucket of more difficult types of content to moderate. So because of that, and for various other reasons, we have a three-pronged approach to how we treat misinformation. Number one, we remove the most harmful misinformation that can lead to offline physical violence. Number two, we reduce the distribution of misinformation if it is found to be false by one of our third-party fact checkers, and then we will reduce that misinformation on our platforms so that people are less likely to engage with it. And number three is we seek to inform. If people have engaged with misinformation on our platforms, we want them to be informed that they have indeed done so. We want them to know that they have maybe unintentionally shared misinformation. And we want them to have access to authoritative sources of information. So those are our three-pronged processes, right? Remove the most harmful that can lead to physical violence, reduce other types of misinformation that may not lead to physical violence, and inform our community. I should also mention, and this is obviously very, very important in the context of the election cycle that we're also in. There's another type of misinformation that we will outright remove, and that is misinformation on elections, right? And so if there is misinformation specifically about electoral procedures, about the date the election is going to take place, the way you cast a ballot, those are other types of misinformation that we will outright remove from our platform. What's important to recognize, and I'll go to the next slide here, is how we determine the differences between what we remove, what we reduce, and how we inform, right? So please go to the next slide. At Meta, and indeed I think most digital platforms take the same approach, where we want to be very careful about being the arbiters of truth. Right? In many ways, in many aspects, we feel that that's a responsibility that is too great for us to have, and can lead to situations where we're trying to make determinations that we're just not qualified to make about what is true and what is false. And as you might imagine, trying to police misinformation at the scale of more than 3.2 billion people every day would become practically impossible, right? And so what we do is we work with third-party fact checkers in more than 60 languages around the world. These third-party fact checkers are non-governmental organizations that are certified by the International Fact-Checking Network, the IFCN. That is how the fact checkers are chosen, and that's how they are certified. And so what we do is, when we are made aware of a potential piece of misinformation, that piece of content will be enqueued to the third-party fact checkers themselves. In Philippines, we work with 3 third-party fact checkers. We work with Verifiles, Rappler, and AFP. And they are very active fact checkers, I should say. And then we wait for, and while that content is in queued, then it's up to the third-party fact checker to determine whether that content is indeed false, or there are other cases, right? You can imagine that misinformation isn't just binary. It's not necessarily true or false entirely. There are cases where it can be partially false, it can be misleading, it can be lacking context, right? So there are a number of different ratings that fact checkers can apply on our systems, and those ratings will lead to different actions by Meta's platforms, right? But in a case where a rating is rated false, then that content will be reduced in distribution and will have a label applied to it so that the people who potentially see that content can click on the label and read for truth or for authoritative information from the third-party source, right? And so that's our general approach to how we would treat misinformation when it would not be specifically physically lead to specific physical violence or lead to to misinformation on the elections process, right? Now, in a case, like I said, where a third-party fact checker not only clarifies that it's false, and we get additional signal that it can lead to violence, or additional signal that this could clearly impact the ability of people to have the access to information they need to properly access the electoral process, then we can outright remove the information. But that is not, those, I just want to emphasize that the outright removals of misinformation are much more limited in scope. I would also just like to note that, if we see that there are repeated violations, or sorry, I shouldn't say violations, if there are repeated instances of misinformation from the same people, from the same pages, then that can lead to overall less distribution of the content by those people and by those pages. And it can lead to other actions such as demonetization, the prohibition on placing ads, and so forth, right? So there are a number of kind of increasing scale of penalties that can be applied if you're a repeat purveyor of misinformation on our platforms. I think we have an example. If the next slide, please. Right. So here's just one example of a fact check on our platform. This was a fact check of a claim that a blogger made that the Philippines had used water cannons against the Chinese Coast Guard. This was false. This was rated false by our fact checkers. And you can see on the left, this is the actual fact check. And on the right, this is how the content would now appear on our platform with a screen over it, right, and a warning along with the label that explains that this is false content, right? And again, this would also be content that is reduced in distribution, and so even getting to that content would be much less likely on the part of any user using our platforms. I think the last thing I would just like to say is on the topic of misinformation is, there can also be misinformation networks that are doing this with intentionality. We put out a threat report, I believe, every quarter, where we go through globally the types of actions we've taken against networks. Right, I mentioned a number of actions we've taken recently against scam networks and transnational criminal networks in 2024. That was included in one of our threat reports. But it's public information. You can go online and access this information. And we have taken down a number of networks over the years in Philippines for many different reasons, not just because of their misinformation. We've seen scam networks. We have seen misinformation, disinformation networks. Those are all publicly reported in our threat report. And again, we have done this in collaboration with local law enforcement, so that when we're made aware of, and our investigators internally can confirm that there are misinformation networks that are operating on our platforms, we will take those down. And Mr. Chairman, I've gone on for quite some time explaining our content moderation policies and the basics of our misinformation policies. I think Rob has added to that with some color around the very close collaboration that we have with law enforcement in the Philippines. I know there's a lot of questions that you and the committee want to answer, and I'm very happy to take those now with a lot of gratitude, and I want to emphasize this point, a lot of gratitude we have to you and the committee for giving us the space to be here to talk to you and the Filipino people about these very important issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Rafael. We will now proceed to the interpellation with regards to the Meta issue. The first to interpellate will be Honorable Franz Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also thank the Meta for coming here after 3 notices. Thank you. I have some specific personal question about how the Meta is detecting community standards violation, or what you call violation of community standards. When you look at the when you look at your platform, we have here several. When you report like a content, you will find here several violations like scam, fraud, or impersonation, unauthorized political ad, adult content, selling or promoting restricted items, violence, hate, or exploitation, bullying or unwanted content, intellectual property, suicide or self-harm, false information, problem involving 18-year-old or someone under 18 years old. Well, I was a victim of your platform, where my official Facebook account were taken down by your platform due to it said there impersonation. So I cannot understand why do you take down an account due to impersonation. So how does it happen? So how will you determine that really is this account is impersonated? Because this account was reported to COMELEC as my official election account for my daily activities during election.
Thank you, Madam Congressman. Mr. Chair, if I may. Madam Congresswoman, thank you for your question. Certainly impersonation is a violation of our community standards. And there, I can say that I don't know the specifics of your case, but let me talk about a little bit about how we try to deal with issues of impersonation, right? First of all, there can be a number of different reasons that an account might be taken down, right? There can be repeated violations of our community standards, or there can be very severe violations of our community standards. But other times, it can be because someone was able to, unfortunately, gain access to your account. Not your account, but anyone's account, right? It can happen that unauthorized access can take place, right? In those cases, they may, once a hacker has gained access to an account, then, sometimes what we see is they go and delete the account, or then they take over that account to use it for their own purposes. And what we do in those cases is we work with the rightful account holder to retake control of their account, right? So we ask for credentials. It could be a government ID. It could be various email addresses or other identifying information that were used with that account in order to regain control of it. I think one thing we've seen and that we know is an extremely effective guard against having accounts taken over by hackers is two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is really the first line of defense that any user on Facebook, including members of Congress, have against their accounts being taken over. If you have two-factor authentication on, anytime someone would seek to make changes to your account, it would ping you to make sure that you're the right person and you're authorizing those changes. I would urge everyone to make sure they have two-fact turned on their account. I think it's also worth noting that, for government officials, for politicians who are engaged in an election cycle, we have specific channels where we can work together. We have our Meta Support Pro channel that you can access and that we're happy to work with you to make sure you have access to, so that if you have specific issues with your account, other members of Congress, other people running for election can access those channels. I think it's also worth noting, and I didn't really mention this in my opening comments, but I think I should, that that there are a number of different statutory agencies that have specific channels with Meta where they can report community standards violations, account hacks, and any other issues that the government is experiencing with Meta's platforms and our services. In fact, there are 11 different government agencies that have direct channels to us. And so those are other channels that can certainly be utilized in cases where members of Congress experience those types of actions. And I would just also say, it does also happen from time to time that we make mistakes. That is also something that happens, and we're sorry for when that happens. We know it's a really poor experience. We don't want that to happen. We take those instances very seriously. We do everything we can to try to minimize them. And so that's also just something that can happen sometimes.
So when my account was took down, we complained to we write to the Meta about my account, and then why is it that you are taking down specific account without explanation or without any justification to the subscriber? Like, for example, just take the account and that's it. So no explanation at all. So you will just explain if we will write to you on what happened to the account. So there's no, is there a like for example, due process in place in your platform?
Thank you for the question, Congressman, Mr. Chair, if I may. Madam Congresswoman, again, I'm not familiar with the specifics of your case, but I, again, can talk in general. Users should receive notifications if actions have been taken against their account. That is certainly part of the due process that we have in place, and users have a right of appeal. And in fact, when we see mistakes happen and users appeal those actions, the content in question, if it was a community standards violation, may often be restored. In some cases, the account would be restored. I do just want to highlight, in the specific case of hostile takeover of accounts, or what Meta believes may be a hostile takeover of an account, that can be a more complex process for very good reason. We want to make sure that we are not providing access to the account of someone who shouldn't have it. And so, Madam Congresswoman, I would just emphasize again that if you or another member of Congress is having any types of these issues, we can certainly provide you access to our Meta Support Pro and other channels so that we can solve these problems together.
Mr. Chair, may I ask also that, are you familiar with troll armies? Troll armies, or mass reporting of an account so that it could be taken down for any other reasons. Are you familiar with that? Because I'm suspecting that my personal account was a victim of that scheme by army trolls, or by a group who would like to take down my account. Because as I can see here in your process of checking the misinformation and disinformation, it would be, if it is mass reported, it goes to your AI, and then after that, human checking, right? Right? In your graph of how to determine the disinformation or violation of your community standards. So, so my questions is, are you familiar with that scheme?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Madam Congresswoman, coordinated mass reporting absolutely violates our policies. We have seen that type of behavior before and certainly if we detect that type of behavior, then we would seek to make sure that any decisions that are made about accounts are the correct ones. And then we would also try to go after the people who are engaged in the coordinated mass reporting, because that clearly does violate our policies. And that's the type of abusive network that we would seek to prohibit from utilizing our platforms.
Another question, Mr. Chair, is about the inaction of the Meta on the AI-generated images abused. I was also a victim of that when I hold a gun. They are using the AI-generated, but still in the platform. But the Meta is not doing anything about that, and many progressive organizations and individuals are victims of that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, so the question...
So how do you detect, or why are you not taking down AI-generated images that you think are not or inappropriate or not true or misinformation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Madam Congresswoman, and for the committee, I think I would start from the place of our view of misinformation is that whether or not it's AI generated or not, it would be misinformation, right? And so I think first and foremost, what I would say and emphasize is that our misinformation policies apply to content that is AI generated and is not AI generated. Now, taking a larger look at AI generated content, okay. There's a few different pieces to this, right? First and foremost, if people use meta AI in our own products to generate, for generative AI imagery or the like, we have the ability to detect that, right? And it'll come with a watermark, basically, and therefore a label and be recognizable as a generated AI image. Now, if people are using other tools, right, then basically it's harder to detect what is generative AI and what is not. This is an area of very significant investment for Meta right now. We're working very hard on ways to detect what is generative AI and what is not. I think that part of the issue that we have here, and this is one where what we need is collective action. At the moment, there's no agreed upon industry standard for watermarking or for how platforms like ours should go about detecting the difference between generative AI and non-generative AI content. And so that's an area where we really need more focused industry collaboration, and certainly we are trying to drive that. For Meta, we believe it's very important for that type of collaboration to happen between industry, civil society, and governments. And I think the last thing I would really talk about when it comes to generative AI imagery or other content is really distinguishing between paid content and non-paid content, right? If you are, just generally speaking, at Meta, we take a much more stringent approach to moderating paid content, right? Because obviously we're taking money for it. We believe we have responsibility that's even greater, and the distribution would be increased, right? And so, in the context of anything that is, again, taking out the generative AI component of it, any type of content that is paid for, that is political in nature, that talks about a campaign or a politician or a social issue, right, is subject to our policies on political candidates and social issue paid advertising, right? And according to those policies, you would be required to disclose who is paying for the ad and sponsoring the content. You would also have to go through an authorization process, which would include, in most cases, providing a government ID.
Okay,
And you would have to be,
you on that.
if I could just finish one last point, you'd have to be located in Philippines, right? If you want to run a social issue or political ad, you'd have to be located in Philippines, right? And so there's a series of steps that you have to take to cross that threshold in order to be able to run those types of ads. And then in addition to it, if it is AI generated, you'd be required to disclose that it is an AI generated paid piece of content. Thank you.
So really, it's very hard to determine because the name of the account is alias, or the name of account is just like a like for example, Makabayan. The account is using our political organization. That account names Makabayan, is using our political organization, but it has this what I saw an AI generated images of mine with guns, with the rebels, etc. I will give you the images later so that you can see.
Mr. Chair, if thank you, Madam Congresswoman, and I know my colleague also wants to add on to this.
Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, Madam Congresswoman, it's my understanding that you reported this content, this image, to Comelec, and we have removed it.
Yeah.
I would like to also state respectfully for the record that we're not doing nothing on harmful generative AI. In fact, as recently as, it was either yesterday or the day before, I personally worked directly with PAOK to remove a harmful piece of generative AI that was promoting investment scams. And what happens when something like that gets reported, it's not just that piece of content that comes down. That informs our ability to enforce across the platforms and across other accounts. So although PAOK reported one specific URL, many, many others came down as a result of that report. So while I understand, with respect, how painful and frustrating it must be to be a victim of harmful generative AI, please don't think we're doing nothing. But we are not perfect yet, but we always strive to be better. We strive to be better by signal sharing and trend sharing with Filipino law enforcement, legislative, NGOs, civil society, etc. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize what Rob said about, please, if you believe that there's a piece of content that violates our policies, please do report it through Comelec, and we'll treat it with the utmost urgency. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, last question. And in your presentation, you have also employed organization or fact-checker organization. Can you name those? Do you have an example? The Vera files you have. What is AFP?
Correct.
What is AFP?
That's a
Mr. Chair, if I may. Agence France Presse.
Okay.
It's a global news organization.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before we proceed, may I inform everyone that this will be a working lunch, so please feel free to have your lunch while the hearing is ongoing. Before we proceed with the next interpolator, may I acknowledge the presence of Deputy Speaker J.J. Suarez, Honorable Jefferson Conghon, Honorable Julien Baronda, and present online, Honorable Janet Garin, Honorable Isabel Maria Zamora, Honorable Ramon Rodrigo Gutierrez, Honorable Joe Sobiri, Honorable Drixie Cardema. Next interpolator will be Honorable Salvador Plato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. To our dear colleagues and our esteemed guests. I just want to ask a question to Mr. Abrams. What Mita's stance on government requests for user data? For instance, for example, there is a law enforcement investigation against a blogger suspected of peddling malicious content on social media, and his data and posts are needed for the investigation. Will Mita provide those requested data? What is your policy or misinformation and disinformation? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, with permission, I'll do my best to address the concern. So our stance on data disclosure is governed by U.S. law because that's where data is stored. However, this being a rule of law country, we do voluntarily disclose data to Filipino law enforcement on a daily basis, which is in accordance with U.S. law, Filipino law, and our terms of service. I'd like to point out that in order for us to lawfully disclose data to your government, the offense also has to be a crime under U.S. law. That's not a decision me or any American tech company can make. That's federal U.S. law, several of them. So I'm aware of the subpoena that was issued by, I believe it may have been your good officer. It's under legal review right now. But law enforcement agencies here in this room submit data requests to us quite literally every day. I personally and many who work with me worked closely with your government to help pass IATA and the anti-OSAIC laws, which brought the Philippines into a more sort of modern posture, if you like, in terms of not needing a warrant for crimes against children and human trafficking, so we can provide basic subscriber information on those. I was very proud to work with the NBI as the first ever data request under that regime was issued to us. But our stance is governed largely by American law. So if you have follow-up questions, I'll do my best to address those, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Another question is, do you have a system of censorship on posts which are against moral values, especially those which can erode the minds of children? Do you have the power to delete those unlawful, malicious, libelous posts? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So it's hard for me to answer hypothetically, but I can speak pretty robustly about our child safety policies, and we work very closely with your government around those. So bullying and harassment, of course, CSAM and OSAIC and human trafficking, both illegal and against our terms of service. As Rafi mentioned at the top, we're doing a lot on digital literacy so that Filipinos can analyze for themselves or are better equipped to analyze what is harmful content and what is not. But without more specific information, I don't know that I can address those. I do, however, think, as I stated in the Senate last week, we are among industry leaders, if not the leaders, when it comes to our forward-leaning stance around child safety. And we collaborated very, very extensively with the BICAM, both in the formation of the IATA legislation and the anti-OSAIC legislation, as well as the operationalization with the IRR procedures. And we, I believe, were the first to ever be issued a subpoena, and that was by NBI. We continue to get requests like those all the time, Paul.
Congressman, if I may add to that, just as a sample of the type of content that's not allowed on our platform would be hateful conduct, bullying and harassment, incitement to violence, the sharing of any type of child exploitative imagery, graphic violence, all of these types of content would be prohibited under our policies. And I would just also emphasize another point. In addition to all the work that the ROB and the law enforcement agencies of Philippines have done over the course of the many years now to protect Philippine children, we have also, as a company, recently developed special, what we call teen accounts, right? So first of all, no one under the age of 13 is allowed to use Facebook or Instagram. But if you're within the age group of 13 to 18, we've recently developed special teen accounts.
13 to 18?
13 to 18,
18.
right? Because below 13, you're not allowed on our services. And obviously when you're 18, now you're an adult, right? So we're talking about special teen accounts for youth in the range of 13 to 18 years old. Just as an example of some of the features of those accounts, you would have filters against sharing of nudity. You would have blockers on the ability of people who are much older than you to reach out and contact you. If you're in the range of 13 to 16, there are specific elements of parental supervision and indeed control that are built into those accounts so that parents can really supervise what their teens are doing online. There are provisions to remind teens to basically set alarms for how much time they're actually using the services so that they're not using them too frequently. And those are just a few of the features that we have developed recently with the specific objective of protecting children and making sure that youth on our platforms have a positive experience that really aligns with what parents want, and that gives parents really strong tools to understand how their children are using our services, and in many cases to supervise the use of our services. Thank you, sir.
Last question, Mr. Chair. I was asking, do you have the power to delete this unlawful, malicious, libelous post? Do you have the power to delete?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Chair, I was asking if you have the power to delete unlawful, malicious, and libelous posts.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Sir. Sir, I think it's hard to talk about unless we see a specific piece of content, right? But if I can, I'll be happy to talk about our general approach to those types of issues. As I said, we do not allow hate speech, bullying and harassment, incitement to violence as general part of our policies, right? Those types of content are prohibited. In some cases, as I'm sure you may agree, you may have a hard time defining exactly where to draw the line between something that is fair criticism and or libelous or defamatory under local law. I think it's worth mentioning that, there are, we do allow for criticism under local law, criticism under our community standards, especially if it involves public figures. If there's a political campaign and as Philippines is a very vibrant and robust democracy, you have a very vibrant debate about political issues and about candidates. And so I think, we do allow for criticism of public figures, of politicians, of office holders, right? But where we would try to draw the line is where it goes into matters of true hate speech, incitement to violence, threats of physical violence, that type of thing. I would also say that, again, I would just go back to something that Rob mentioned earlier when it came to the Congresswoman's question. If you have a specific piece of content that you believe would violate our policies, that you believe crosses the line in terms of local law when it comes to defamation or libel, then please do work with COMELEC or DICT to send that piece of content to us, and we'll be happy to review it. And Rob.
Mr. Chair, if I may just make what I hope is a helpful addition. Sir, you mentioned, we're pretty direct in mentioning the idea of local nuance and our ability to respond to something that is perhaps agnostic to someone who's not familiar with the Filipino context. So just by way of a very recent example, just last week it was brought to our attention that a keyword was being used in association with content that's very harmful to children. It's involved in CSAM and sex trafficking. It was brought to our attention by your government. It's a Tagalog word spelled backwards. If someone like Rafi or I were to look at it, we'd have no idea. But because we have such a good relationship with the government, it was brought to our attention, and very quickly we were able to ban it. So in terms of our ability to respond to local nuance, I think we're good at that, and we're trying to always, improve upon that. It's hearings like these, it's our daily interaction with the operational folks that keeps us sort of hopefully on the cutting edge of all of the local nuance that's continually evolving. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Abrams and Director Frankel. Thank you very much.
The next interpolator will be Honorable Paulo Ortega.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I would like to, of course, thank Meta for the partnership given with our city and district. The PLC and in San Fernando, La Union, you have created a lot of opportunities and jobs for our locals. With that, Mr. Chair, I would like to zero in on a few questions, mostly on the political context. The presentation has shown us a lot of different contexts, but I was looking for the political context side, but I have a few questions directly about this. During the question and answer with some of the members, we've seen that you have taken already you have noted and you have done some actions to ensure that there is moderation with the content, especially politically. Are you hiring Filipino moderators? Do you hire Filipino moderators, or like your previous statements, you have partnered with the IFCM?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. First of all, Congressman, thank you so much. We're really happy with the partnership we have with the PLCN and thrilled for the benefits it's providing to the Filipino people in terms of connectivity. And we only hope to do more.
Yeah,
and so we really hope that we can continue that type of partnership to bring these types of services and digital connectivity to Philippines, which obviously in the 21st century would be a huge boost. Thank you very much for the question. I think that I would, let me break this down into two different parts, right? First of all, absolutely yes. We very much have moderators that are from Philippines, that are native language speakers, and they're looking at content in the Philippines every single day. So absolutely yes, we do have those. I just want to make a distinction between moderators that look at potential violations of community standards versus third-party fact checkers. They're not the same thing. The moderators that we have are really looking at potential violations of our community standards. The third-party fact checkers are looking to determine if pieces of content are misinformation, right? But to be clear, those are also local, right? We work with 3 third-party fact checkers in Philippines, Verifiles, Rappler, and AFP. And again, all of them, of course, are local and have the local context, local native language capabilities. So absolutely, very much yes. We have the capabilities to both moderate content against our community standards and work with third-party fact checkers on misinformation in Philippines.
Mr. Chair, can I add, do you think they have the capacity for real-time review, or is it a taller task than it is?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, again, I would like to break these because they're two different things, really. And I think we do have to make sure we're being distinct about how we talk about our general content moderation versus the misinformation. So starting with our content moderation and our community standards moderation, what we do is we prioritize the most severe harms first. It is not necessarily a first in, first out content moderation system. What we do is we prioritize the most harmful pieces of content first. So, for example, if we see that there are reports of child exploitative imagery, that's going to jump all the way to the top of the queue, right? If we see reports of terrorism content, incitement to violence, right, those types of things, those are going to jump ahead because of their potential to cause harm, right? And then that's the type of process we use so that we ensure that we are acting in a timely fashion against the most severe harmful content. Now, when it comes to misinformation, again, different, right? What we can do is we can ourselves send content for the fact checkers to check, or the fact checkers can do it themselves. They have the ability not to wait for us and to actually check content on their own. And what we see in the Philippines is they are very robust. I think we have some of the most robust fact checkers in the world active in the Philippines, and very active in terms of many of the political and types of content trends that we're seeing on our platforms today in Philippines.
So Mr. Chair, you're saying that you are prioritizing real-world harm, something that would really harm a specific place, a community, or even other countries, same country you're in. Is that how I understand it, sir?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, I mean, there's some nuance here, but in a basic sense, yes, right? I mean, certainly if there's content out there that can lead to real-world, offline, physical harm, then yes, that's going to, generally speaking, jump to the top of the queue. Yes.
So if I'm reading your presentation correctly, may I ask what type of accountability does Meta have in the Philippines when these things go south, or even if we tend to go to something a lot worse than regular trolling, regular misinformation? I would like to be clarified on that, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may. So, just to emphasize again, I want to be really clear. These systems are operating in parallel. Our ability to remove content that has the potential to cause offline harm has no impact on our ability to work with third-party fact checkers on misinformation. Those are operating in parallel, right? So I think, is that the answer to your question, or are you asking something different?
Yeah, it is actually, but I would like a sense of something more accountable coming from the company's sense towards a local like the Philippines.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yeah, Congressman, I think that, first of all, we're sitting here today, which I'm glad to be doing. I think it's very important that Meta, as a company with such ubiquitous and important services, answer your questions on these really important issues, especially in the lead up to an election. I'd like to point out that maybe we didn't actually show that slide now that I think about it, but we put a slide on our presentation that showed the award that we received from Comelec after the last election for the work we did to protect the integrity of the election. And so, and we intend, and we are in the process of doing that same work now with the midterm elections that are around the corner. And I would also just emphasize again that there are 11 different reporting channels that various agencies of the government and law enforcement have to come to Meta for accountability, right? And on top of all that, we also publish our transparency report every 6 months, where we demonstrate in a very transparent and open manner the content that we've removed based on violations of our community standards, the content that we have restricted due to local law, data requests that we have acted on based on law enforcement, and a number of other metrics that really show kind of how Meta is approaching our responsibilities in the Philippines, and I believe my colleague Rob would also like to add to that.
Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, may I add to the response? A very important question when you're talking about accountability. So I just want to speak briefly about real-world harm. When there is potential, and there's been a crime committed, and there's potential for real-world harm, law enforcement agencies in this room know how to lawfully request data from us. So we've helped mitigate innumerable threats here in the Philippines, from terrorist threats to kidnapping threats to child exploitation threats. We proactively escalate suicidal users. So when it comes to accountability, I think from the perspective of the law enforcement outreach team, we want to make sure that the Filipino law enforcement agencies present can probably speak to this as well, but we have a very robust data disclosure policy that's in line with our terms of service, American law, and Filipino law. And it's used each and every day by Filipino law enforcement so that they can go after the actual bad actors that are operating off-platform and coordinating off-platform harm. Thank you, sir.
And lastly, Mr. Chair, to drive at my point, would Meta support Philippine Regulatory Committee for social media platforms so that they can partner and help out does the same regulatory committee if it was formed? I believe that your presence here would be a big help and a good sign to this inquiry. But again, we are aiming towards a regulatory committee that would help us, especially combat fake news and others.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, Congressman. I'd be more than happy for Meta as a company to engage with the Philippines government and Congress on any type of regulation that you're considering when it comes to these issues. I think we have now many years of experience in terms of working with governments around Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, and indeed globally, to come up with modalities and regulations that really can help protect users, but also protect freedom of expression, that try to properly balance freedom of expression and safety, and that, of course, account for local nuance. It's really important that countries have their own solutions, and we're happy to share what we feel like works, what's been more challenging, and what doesn't work, and we'd be very happy to engage Congress further on that issue. And I'd appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll reserve some of my questions for the second round. Thank you, sir.
Honorable Arlene Brosas is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions also, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, how many websites or applications are under the Meta umbrella?
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, if I may. We have Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp, Threads, which is a part of Instagram to a sense. We have our Quest devices, which are virtual reality devices that also have application, and we have specific application for our Meta Ray-Ban glasses that we are now producing together with Ray-Ban. There's a specific application for that. And then, of course, we have the various websites that also operate these platforms, including now Meta AI.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If you'd like a very complete, thorough, total list, I'm happy to provide that for you in writing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my next question is, do you have for example, a study of which is the most to have a content of disinformation and fake news? Which of these the websites or applications have the most? Is it Facebook?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. So thank you. Congresswoman, that's a very tough question to answer. Again, I'll just go back to the kind of place where I started with, which is how do you determine what's misinformation, right? That is not an easy question to answer, but what I would say is
we can qualify it as what's reported right now.
Yeah. So if
is
you
it Facebook? Can you give us?
Yeah. So if you look at the fact checks that are reported. And now, but I just want to be clear, just speaking of Philippines, right? I believe, and I can check this to make sure that it's accurate after the hearing, but I believe that the most fact checks we see in Philippines are on Facebook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my question is, how do you ensure that there are no disinformation or fake news that are being disseminated in, for example, in the Facebook platform? Previously, my colleague said that she reported the fake news, the AI-generated content. Do you have a mechanism of removing a content if it's disinformation or fake news motu proprio? For example, if it's not reported and it's being generated, so those are two different things, right? One is reported and one is not reported. If there's no report of that, but it's an AI generated and it's a disinformation or fake news kind of news.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Congresswoman. The fact checkers that we work with, the third-party fact checkers, have the ability to, and they do very often, fact check content even if we have not reported it to us. So the answer is yes. And I would say, I just reiterate, from earlier in my presentation, that whether a piece of content is AI generated or not, we would still treat it the same as misinformation.
So there's a form to, if there's no report, you can actually flag it as a disinformation or fake news, right?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, so let me talk about all the different ways that this can be done, right? First of all, as your colleague showed earlier, a user that's scrolling through Facebook can report something if they believe it's false information, and that would flag it for our systems so that we would have a look at that and potentially pass it on to a third-party fact checker. Also, we ourselves have the ability to look at content that we see going viral, and if we have reason to believe that that would be a potentially harmful piece of misinformation, we can send it to the third-party fact checkers. And also, the third-party fact checkers can and very much do fact check misinformation on their own without any prompt from us or anyone else.
Yes,
and I would just like, sorry, and I would also just stress that the government also has its own reporting channels to us. So if we get a report of misinformation from COMELEC or DICT or other agencies that are onboarded to our channels, we will also review that and pass it to the third-party fact checkers.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I have here an example of the fact check, example of the fact check image. This is from Digsan. If you think this is normal, then you are abnormal. Hashtag Quadcom, hashtag Duterte, hashtag NPA, hashtag HOR, hashtag Philippines. And there's an image of the three of us. It is alarming to see our leaders being questioned by NPA affiliates. The House of Representatives tolerates this, and it is very disturbing. So, Mr. Chair, it was fact-checked by Rappler, and the claim was it's false. No, so this is an example of how the Meta does it, right? I don't know how you fact check, for example, how you take down, or what is your standards on taking down the AI that is not being fact checked by this by Verifiles, by Rappler, by those that you've actually mentioned before.
Mr. Chairman, Congresswoman. In the presentation I gave, I highlighted that we have a three-pronged approach to misinformation. We remove the most harmful misinformation if we believe that it can lead to, and we can independently confirm that it can lead to offline harm and violence in the real world. We will also do that in the case that it violates certain types of elections law. With misinformation that does not meet that threshold, we will use our third-party fact checkers to check if indeed that misinformation is false or partially false or missing context or any of those kind of labels. And if the third-party fact checker does confirm that it's false, then we will reduce the distribution of that content on our platforms, and we will put a label on it so that someone who sees that content understands that they are looking at content that has been determined by a third-party fact checker to be at least false or partially false, or as I said, there's a number of other labels they can apply. I showed an example earlier about what that would look like on our platforms. And so when it comes to AI, I think the important thing to reiterate is, number one, that whether a piece of content is AI generated or not, the misinformation policies still apply. Right? They apply across the board. So if there is a piece of misinformation that's generated by AI, it's still going to be the same misinformation policies. Now, there is one additional point to make, which I mentioned previously, which is that if it's a paid piece of content, if it's sponsored, if it's an ad, then there are additional checks that we do, and we require that whoever has placed that ad or boosted that content disclose that it is AI generated, right? And then you'll also be able to go into the ad library and see the details, and these are all publicly available, of who placed the ad, how much was spent on it, and so forth. And if these ads are politically, if they're political in nature, if they are about the election, about a campaign, about a political candidate, if they're about social issues, then they have to go through our authorization process for running political and social ads. That adds another layer of authorization and verification, so that means that,
I mean, my question is, how do you control this? You have the controls, you have the technology. How do you control this kind of an... I am asking this, Mr. Chair, because we are always the victims of red tagging, and it is a danger to our life, liberty, and property. And we all know that those are actually false contents. But it keeps on proliferating in the internet. Right now, even right now, as we are speaking. So I'm asking the Meta, how do they do that? Is there, actually my next question is about how many disinformation have you had banned or removed, or how do you control this fake news or disinformation? How many are based on complaints? How many are initiated by your platforms, for example? Those are questions that I would like to be, answered.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, Congresswoman, I think the issue of red tagging is one that we take very, very seriously, and I would express my sympathy to anyone who's been the victim of that. That's obviously a very, very, very difficult experience, and one that I would certainly not wish on anyone. I would just like to emphasize that red tagging violates our policies. We view red tagging as a form of coordinating harm on our platform, and that is prohibited. When we're made aware of it, and we confirm that it's red tagging, then we will remove that content. We've done that in many, many cases for a number of years now. And I would just emphasize again that does violate our policies, and we will remove it when it's reported to us. So I would encourage you or any other victim of red tagging to send a report to us via COMELEC, via DICT, or the other channels that we have with the government, and we would review that with the utmost urgency, given the potential for harm. Your second question was about fact-checking, I believe, right? And I would just say that when it comes to fact-checking, there's a publicly available library, and we can share that with the committee of the different types of fact checks that have been placed on our platform. Just recently, I think we've seen a number of different issues that have been covered by our fact checkers in Philippines, and again, I think those are all publicly available, and be happy to share a list with the committee. But anyone can find that also, as they're all online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, in terms of red tagging, you act through complaints. For example, you mentioned the ICT, you mentioned COMELEC. So if there's no complaint, you don't act on it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congresswoman, we would act on it if we were, in any case that we're aware of it. If a member of our internal teams finds it, they would act on it even without a report. So I do just want to make that clear. I think that we do very much benefit from the reports we get. I mean, it is hard. I think one of the things that we know about red tagging is that, and I kind of mentioned this before, there are different types of content. When we look at violations of our community standards, there's the type of content that very clearly violates, it's not even close, it's a clear violation of our community standards. The really obvious examples are child exploitative imagery, terrorism, graphic violence. I mean, it is much easier to moderate that kind of content. When we get down to the level of speech, and red tagging is one of these issues, it sometimes can be nuanced, right? Now, it doesn't mean we don't take it seriously. We take it very seriously, right?
You have guidelines on that.
We do absolutely have guidelines on that. We absolutely have guidelines on red tagging.
Red tagging per se.
Sorry?
Red tagging. Do you have guidelines for that?
Yes, we have guidelines on red tagging. Rob, do you want to add anything on this point?
Just say in general, red tagging often involves doxing, which puts people at risk. So that would be a red line, for example. But I think, again, to emphasize, as Rafi's made clear, this is often very nuanced. But that's why we have what we call the trusted reporting channel. So when we get information from DICT, from COMELEC, from your good office, from law enforcement and others, they're treated with great deference and treated with great priority. But doxing, putting people's lives in danger, that's obviously a red line for us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, knowing how bureaucratic and to an extent slow the processing of legal actions in the Philippines, we are more concerned on your mandate and mechanisms as Meta, as a multinational technology conglomerate in terms of taking action on these matters, no? From fact-checking and ensuring the veracity of contents and users, taking down posts and banning users that proliferate disinformation and red tagging, up to instituting protections to users so as to allow for a healthy and humane interactions and discourses on your platforms. That is what we're expecting.
Mr. Chair, thank you so much, Congresswoman, for the opportunity to discuss these important issues. And we absolutely share the objective of making sure that the platforms that Meta operates in the Philippines are safe ones. And so that's why we're here. That's why we're having this conversation. And we're always, always happy to take more feedback, to look at things that if the Congress believes we can do better, we're happy to take that back and see what can be done. And I think, as Rob said, I would just emphasize, please do utilize the reporting channels that we have established that are very well functioning with the government, with DICT, with the law enforcement, with COMELEC, to address these issues. Anything that can lead to the potential for physical harm, we treat with the utmost severity and urgency.
So Chair, maybe they can help us in the data. For example, how many complaints have they received? How many are initiated by their platform? For example, the total numbers, at least, no? If we can have that idea of how they actually took an action on those complaints. How
But
many?
that would be a substantial number of complaints. I don't know if you'll be able to submit the data to this committee. I mean, well, maybe as far as the Philippines is concerned.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We do put out transparency reports that look at how we have handled government requests, and so those are readily available. I believe the last one we have out right now would be for H1 2024. I can check on when the next one is coming, but beyond that, I'm happy to discuss with the committee, I think more in private, about how we can potentially share additional data around how we have acted on government requests.
Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, might I just add to that response? I really like the fact that you said, I believe, was it humane and fair? I think that's very, very well put. I want to make it very clear that we are not in a reactive-only posture when it comes to the upcoming midterms. We've been having weekly huddles with meetings that are very multidisciplinary and cross-functional at our, at our headquarters in Singapore. That is largely staffed by our Filipino colleagues. We are firm in our belief that the Filipino election is for Filipinos, and we're doing everything we can to keep it free, fair, and free from interference. And to your point, Madam Congresswoman, humane as well. But as the chair and I were discussing along with Rafi, we've seen firsthand, and this is now my second or third round of elections here in the Philippines, it's a very vibrant, bare-knuckle democracy here. So yeah, it can get pretty rough and tumble.
Yes, Mr. Chair, but we would like to lessen the fake news and disinformation. So we need those data that we really need those data.
Would you allow releasing that data? Would it be proper if this committee would write you an official communication to access those data?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I think it would be helpful if you could, as a committee, specify the type of data you'd like to see, and then we can take that under advisement and share what we can, and have a discussion about what type of data we share and kind of what's most helpful to you.
Yeah, okay, we will send an official communication for that data.
Last question, Mr. Chair. Do you have ways to ensure that the same people, for example, if an account is banned or removed from the platform, or the account holder, they can simply make a new one, right? So how do you ensure that the same people will not be able to make a new account? For example, like banning their IP addresses instead of just removing their Facebook accounts. Do you have that power?
Mr. Chairman, if it's yes, so we do have policies against this, which we call recidivism. We can and do, in many cases, try to ban IP addresses. I would say that this is difficult. It's a difficult space because
That's
it's
in CSAM, right? In the
Yes.
in cases of child pornography and OSAIC.
Yes, absolutely. For those types of very high severity violations, those people would be banned from our platforms. And we do our best to keep people off once they have been deleted. But what I would say is what we encounter are various levels of adversarial behavior. There are some people, including very well-financed criminal organizations, who are very determined to maintain a presence on our platforms, and that is a hard battle that we fight. We do our best. We continue to fight that battle every day. We do it with the help of our law enforcement colleagues in Philippines and around the world. But it's not always easy. We try to do our best we can. We have also new technology that we use. AI is incredibly helpful and a remarkably helpful tool. in helping us kind of try to.
It's also a helpful tool for those who makes this.
Yeah, we've talked a lot today about some of the potential harm of AI, but I think that what I would emphasize is that AI is also the best shield in many cases, right? We've developed AI technology to help moderate our platforms, both at the content level and, as you were talking about, the user level, for many, many years. We're able to delete literally billions of accounts, like the ones you're talking about, because of AI. And so those are capabilities that we have. They're always turned on. They're always active. Again, our transparency report does go into the numbers of the billions of accounts that we delete from people like that who are trying to get back onto the platform even though they've been banned, or they're creating spam accounts, or many other reasons, right? And AI is one of the best tools we have in our arsenal to act against that type of work. We're also in the process of looking at other technology, as we long have. For recidivism, you referenced IP blocks. It is something that, there are cases where that's possible, but that's, again, difficult because there's technology that very well-financed people can use to even evade that, right? So this is an adversarial space in some cases, and we do the best we can working with our partners in government and law enforcement to keep people off the platform once they've been removed. Rob, do you want to?
Sure, I'd be happy with the chair's indulgence to add some additional context to that. So when we're talking about the use of AI for detection for harmful content, the reason that north of 99% of child exploitation material doesn't make it onto our platform is because of things like machine learning, AI. The reason that the investment scam generative AI issue that was brought to my attention by the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission the other day is no longer allowed on our platform is because we have fed that into our tooling so that it's no longer available. The reason it's a very big step for us to take an entire device offline is because here in the Philippines, there are still places where families share a single device, where internet cafes share a device. So we want to make sure we're still providing voice to people who are lawfully using the same device. We do, however, to your point, have certain absolute red lines. So a terrorist-related piece of content, CSIM, human trafficking. There's no warnings given to users on that. Their accounts are disabled when something like that happens. Or when they post content of that nature is what I should say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, may we be furnished a copy of the red tagging guidelines na lang. And for the guidelines that they use for determining fake news and the specific timelines for the violations, for example, of the community standards violation, how long does it take?
Is that being addressed to Meta?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
We'll include that in the official communication.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I remind the interpolator, I think this would be the last interpolator because before we proceed, may I acknowledge the presence of our co-chair, Honorable Joe Aquino, and Representative Benya Abante. The Meta representatives will have to take their flight at 3 p.m. So can you make your questions concise? The next interpolator would be Honorable Roch Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the busy schedule that our resource persons have. I'll try to make it quick. Good afternoon to our dear resource persons. I'd like to direct my questions to the Meta while they're here. Mr. Chair, just very briefly, I hope you can bear with us. It's been, it could be confusing for us, especially. Ideally, we would be tackling this together with Google and TikTok. However, understandably, due to schedule concerns or for whatever reason, you've appeared separately. So we'll be going through this all over again. I hope you could bear with us. Before we begin, I'd just like to verify. So, Dr. Frankel, is it, Mr. Chair, to the Honorable Chairman, can you tell us what you do in Meta?
Mr. Chairman, Congressman, I'm the Director of Public Policy for Southeast Asia.
And you are based in where?
Singapore.
In Singapore. And you are part of Meta, the American company.
So I'm an employee of Facebook Singapore PT Ltd. Meta Platforms is the American company.
Meta Platforms is American company, the Singaporean company. And Mr. Abrams, to the Honorable Chairman, may we know your position in Meta?
So I'm one of the heads of law enforcement and national security outreach, handling a large chunk of Southeast Asia. My employer is the same as my colleague Rafi's here.
So likewise, based in Singapore?
Also based in Singapore. Here in the Philippines quite often.
Here in the Philippines quite often. And generally for Meta, although Meta Platforms, the American company, when they operate in Southeast Asia, they would do so through Facebook Singapore. Is that correct?
Every country, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay. Congressman, every country has a different legal structure. Here in Philippines, we have a representative office of our Singaporean company. It's important to note that that representative office is not in charge of business or operations. It does not do anything involving content decisions, right? Those are really, again, those are undertaken by Meta Platforms.
Mr. Chair, I'm glad you brought that up, and actually that would be my next question. So if you are representing Facebook Singapore, and you are doing these regulatory work in behalf of Meta Platforms through Singapore, I assume for Southeast Asia, what is it that Facebook Philippines, what do they do? If it's not anything to do with the support services or content regulation or the actual business of Facebook, Meta Platforms, sorry.
It's actually very much about the business of Facebook. So we have sales and very robust sales and support team. Our public policy team, who's based here, while not involved in takedown decisions and data disclosure decisions, do work very closely with COMELEC and with DICT and with many NGOs. I think what we're trying to emphasize is that no decisions are made here. Those decisions are undertaken by our parent entity in Singapore or in the U.S. So this is really a sales and support office that exists here in BGC.
I'd also say there are various programs that we run that are supported out of our Philippines office, including some of those I talked about earlier, which revolve around digital literacy. And the digital literacy programs with Digital Tayo that we've used to train over 6.5 million people. The digital entrepreneurship programs where we've trained over 60,000 micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Those are also examples of the type of work that our local team here has undertaken, and so forth. There's other examples.
And Mr. Chair, just for the record, respectfully, sir, it's Meta Platforms, Inc. that controls all of our platforms.
Okay.
If that's helpful, Paul.
Thank you for that clarification. And in fact, it is more helpful, so we have a better idea now. So Facebook Philippines is mostly in the business of, well, the business, which is sales, and I would assume this is advertising?
Yeah, we're an ads-based business.
So it's advertising. How about Facebook Marketplace? Is that also within the purview of Facebook Philippines?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I want to check to make sure I get you the totally accurate answer, but I believe the answer is no. I think that Facebook Marketplace is, again, operated by the parent company in the United States, but I do want to qualify that by saying I definitely do want to check to make sure that's correct.
Thank you. So I hope you understand where our confusion is coming from. So I would assume that Facebook Marketplace would be part of the business end of Facebook. So we would assume that that would be something within the purview of Facebook Philippines, considering that there would be regulatory requirements under the DTI and such.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is where it does get a little complicated, right? I mean, to be clear, so there, there's no commerce that's taking place on Marketplace, right? And so but it doesn't mean that we don't comply with local law, right? We, as a global American company that lives up to the best legal standards in the world, we always want to comply with local law. So just because any of the platforms are being operated by an American company doesn't mean that we still won't comply with local law.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, absolutely agree with you, and we are not implying any disregard for local law, but precisely, I think, if you've been listening to our fellow colleagues here, what we're driving at is accountability, which goes beyond just the legal requirements. So I hope you understand where we're driving at with this and why I'm asking these questions. We aren't implying that you aren't following local law. And in fact, we do appreciate all of these efforts that you've done above and beyond the legal requirements that we may have, such as your public outreach programs that you may have, and your facilitating the requests of some of our stakeholders in government. However, I hope you understand that what makes it very difficult for us is that when we have problems, it's very hard to reach Meta Platforms, Inc. So understandably, we are of the position that if we have any problems or anything that we have to relay, we have to go through Facebook Philippines. But as you can see from our previous hearings, they've been tossing us around left and right. We go to Facebook Philippines, they tell us to coordinate, they have no involvement with Meta Platform Inc. We go to Meta Platform Inc. and they say that, no, we're an American company, we won't be going there. So we're now trying to understand, for our purposes in crafting legislation, what legislation can we make given the very specific, special structure that social media corporations tend to have. I hope you understand, because generally what we're trying to regulate here now is within the purview of publication, for example, media. But unlike media, which would operate specifically within a country, we're talking now about, a foreign entity that would now be in the business, not just of, public expression, but also the commercial side of it and advertising. As you said, you're a ads-based business. So now we'd like to just differentiate. So going back to my question, I hope you'd bear with that. So Facebook Marketplace is not with Facebook Philippines. Facebook Philippines deals with the public outreach programs that you mentioned and the business side. So anything that has support for the Meta Platforms Incorporated in relation to content regulation and, for example, double-checking terms of use, if compliance with terms of use, these are not within the purview of Facebook Philippines. That much is clear, correct?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Okay. Thank you, thank you, Congressman. And now I understand where you're going with these questions. So let me just clarify again. The platforms, whether it's Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, Marketplace, they are operated by Meta Platforms, Inc. in the United States. So for the purposes of these hearings, we are the people that can come and address them. And I just want to clarify, and by the way, also, if you would like to have further discussions on regulation that you're considering, we're happy to do that. And I also just want to really, really clarify and emphasize a specific point. We always intended to come to these hearings. I really do want to make sure I say that and repeat it, because it's very true. We always intended to come to these hearings. We needed a little bit of time to make sure that me and Rob could get here. The other times, the dates we were given, there was just very short notice, and we had other commitments. We both have profiles that are regional. And so there was always an intention to come to this hearing and answer your questions and demonstrate the accountability, which we absolutely agree you deserve. We know how important our platforms are. We know that they service the vast majority of Filipino people. We know that they're used for commerce, for social connection, for business, for government affairs. We know how important they are. And we believe that we do have the responsibility to show up and answer these questions. I would also just point out there's a lot of other various forms of accountability that we have. We publish transparency reports that look at how many government requests we've acted on. We have 11 different channels for the government to report to us community standards violations or request data or any other problems that they're having, if there's account hacks or anything like that. There are 11 different channels that we have set up with various agencies of the Philippines government and law enforcement, we're accountable to every single one of those channels and agencies. And beyond that, I think that we try to do the best we can to answer the questions as forthrightly as we can, to explain, frankly, very complex and sometimes nuanced issues the best we can. And I'm always happy to do more of that. And if there are additional conversations we need to have on these topics, on regulation, we're happy to do that. I also just want to point out, and my colleague Rob has already done this, but I'll reiterate it. We know the election's coming. We have been preparing for this for a very long time. In the 2022 elections, Kamalek gave us an award afterwards for the collaboration that we that we had, and for the work that we did protecting the integrity of the elections on our platforms. We absolutely are doing that work again, and I just want to assure the committee that that's the case. Do you have anything you want to add?
Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, yeah, I would just add, sir, and with a little bit of humor, but this is absolutely fact-based. My WhatsApp says otherwise in terms of an inability of Filipino agencies to get a hold of me. I think my last message last night before going to bed was a conversation I was having with NBI. If you're having an issue getting a hold of us, I think that's something we can pretty easily remedy. The point being, however, that MPI, Meta Platforms Inc., operates the platforms. Our office here is happy to help coordinate with Rafi and I, others based in Singapore. It occurs to me, while I have the privilege of being in this chamber, I've appeared in the Senate many, many times, so I am grateful for the opportunity to be in the House today. To your point, it is my first time here in the House, but I've had the privilege of representing MPI, previously Facebook, here in the Republic of the Philippines for over 6 years now, and I hope that our relationship simply continues to grow stronger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, respectfully, and thank you. We appreciate those responses, and we do not doubt that you had the intention to attend, but I just wanted to point it out as an example of how difficult it would be for us to demand accountability. Now, on that question, on that point, that you have 11 different avenues to coordinate with your law enforcement, I hope you understand that's our point. These 11 different avenues are going straight, I'm assuming, to either Facebook Philippines or Meta Platforms Inc. Is that correct? You're saying that these 11 avenues are going directly to you, right? Through your WhatsApp personally, and you are an employee.
No, sir. I apologize. Mr. Chair, if I may, I apologize for breaking etiquette there. The daily sort of informal interactions that I have with the many alphabet soup agencies here represented, and I say that as someone who 6 years ago would be on that side of the table, your side of the table. Those are not the formal reporting channels.
Right.
The formal reporting channels go to our content review teams based either in Singapore or the United States.
Which is, through the Honorable Chairman, precisely our point. The content regulation is not being done by anyone legally accountable in the Philippines. All of these avenues of recourse that you're giving our law enforcement agencies, they have to go to either Facebook Singapore or Meta Platforms Inc. Or, in fact, Facebook Singapore will only serve as a coordinating office to Meta Platforms Inc., if I'm understanding this correctly. So, can you just correct me if for this statement, that if Facebook Philippines does not control the platform, there is no Meta-affiliated entity directly accountable in the Philippines?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we're specifically talking about content, then again, the platforms are operated by Meta Platforms Incorporated in the United States.
Precisely. So there is no Meta-affiliated entity responsible for the content regulation in the Philippines.
Correct.
There. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying, because it seems to us that for us to craft meaningful legislation, we have to take into consideration the fact that there is no legal entity here.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Congressman, I just want to, I would, if I could, take a step back here. I think that what future conversations that we should focus on are, what are the objectives you're trying to achieve that you don't feel like you're achieving now? I think that we have seen similar requests in other countries, which emphasize a similar point that you're making here. But, I think we've proven through our collaboration that Rob has with law enforcement, through the collaboration that my teams and our other teams have with the government, with the ICT, with Comelec, that we are extremely responsive, that we get to the important things quickly, that we act on reports from the government and good faith trusted partnerships that we have in the country. And so I think that, as a global platform, we have to have global systems in place. There's no other way we can operate it at the scale of 3.2 billion people every day. So if there are specific issues that you feel like we need to address and do better, let's absolutely collaborate to address those issues. But I can say, and I feel very confident in saying, there's an immense amount of connective tissue between Meta platforms and all the platforms we operate and the companies that are incorporated under Meta platforms and the Philippines government as a whole. And that relationship that is broad and deep, both, has produced very strong results in terms of collaboration and in terms of removing harmful content, in terms of addressing misinformation, and as I mentioned before, when it came to the last round of elections, it even produced an award from Comelec. And so I think we feel pretty confident that we have the right structure in place, but if there are specific issues that you'd like to address and specific regulations that you'd like to work on, we are very happy to sit down and talk to you about those.
Thank you, through the Honorable Chairman. We appreciate that response, but as we mentioned, what we're trying to come up with here is meaningful legislation to curb fake news and misinformation. So while we do appreciate that Meta Platforms Inc. and Facebook Singapore are very responsive, what we're trying to do here is to come up with, of course, you have to understand, we're not only dealing with Meta, we're also dealing with Google, we're also dealing with TikTok, ByteDance, right? So we're trying to come up with meaningful legislation that can consolidate our issues with all three. So while we do appreciate, again, it bears repeating that we appreciate the responsiveness of Facebook Singapore and Meta Platform Inc. through your respective offices, it doesn't skirt the issue for us that there is no baseline legal responsibility within the Philippines. There is no Meta-affiliated entity within the Philippines. And that's what I believe makes it hard. To just drive that point, perhaps, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a quick side question to maybe one of our officials from the CICC. For example, to our CICC, when we have requests for takedown from Facebook, what is the general turnaround time? First and foremost, do you acknowledge that Facebook is very responsive in your requests?
Yes, Your Honor.
So they are very responsive, and that, again, we do not doubt that. But what's the turnaround time? Is it fast? Is it slow?
Usually, it will be from 6 hours to 24, most of the time.
And in 6 hours to 24 hours, that would be sufficient time for something to go viral, correct?
That's very correct.
And by then, usually the damage is done, especially when we're talking about public reputation.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I think, thank you for that. So I think that's what we're trying to drive at here. We're trying to work with a system that would make it easier for coordination, but that's besides the point right now. Moving on, since we're beyond already the structure, we understand that the Philippines, there's an acknowledgement that there's no Philippine-based entity. I just want to go back to something you were discussing with Congresswoman Castro, that you said that there was a side-by-side, these working in parallel. You have the fact-checking, and you have, what was the other system that you have in place? Sorry?
Community standards. Yes.
Community standards. So community standards would be the more general approach, right? This comes into the general terms of use of your platforms, while misinformation is more specific. Is that correct?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Okay, so the community standards, yes, you can look at them as they're not exactly the terms of service. That's a different legal term. But the community standards are the policies and the rules by which we moderate content on our platforms, right? They're the rules that say this is allowed on our platforms, this is not allowed on our platforms. The rules we have around misinformation are part of the community standards. I think the distinction I was trying to make with the Congresswoman earlier is that when it comes to misinformation, because we believe that it's really third parties that are the ones that are most capable and most appropriate to determine the veracity of information, there is a parallel system that we have in place, which is the third-party fact-checking system, right? And that system is in place, and those fact-checkers can proactively act even without any action on our part. They can act if we send them content that we want them to review from misinformation, but they can also act on their own if they think that there's a piece of misinformation that's going viral and could potentially cause harm. That's what I was trying to distinguish between. Whereas the other community standards violations, such as hate speech, incitement to violence, bullying and harassment, terrorism, child exploitative imagery. Those community standards, those would be looked at by our content moderators, right? And who will make a determination about whether they violate the community standards or not, and therefore are removed or not. And I think Rob would like to add to that.
Your point, Mr. Chair, if I may, your point is very well taken in terms of how the internet works and virality, and we've all seen how that works. The upside to that is when we have a piece of content that's violating, I'd like to just underscore once again that that feeds our ability to prevent its future proliferation. So just by way of example, for something that's a very non-controversial sort of content subset, so terrorism-related content and child exploitation-related content, every piece of video or every photograph that's uploaded to Instagram or to Facebook is compared against an enormous bank of hash values, digital fingerprints, if you like. So once we identify one of those and it's added to the bank, so to speak, it can no longer be spread on our platforms. And as members as the GIFCT, the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, we share those with our partners. We don't compete when it comes to safety, we collaborate. But to your point, yes, 6 hours is enough time for something to go viral. When you're operating at a scale that we are, a little bit south of 90 million users here in the Republic of the Philippines, just on Facebook, 6 hours we think is pretty good. We would love to get it down to 30 seconds. I don't know how realistic that is, but I do want to thank Director Hesolios for the acknowledgement of the progress we've made on turnaround times.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the response, and we appreciate that point. And I stand corrected. It's not just the terms of use. It's terms of use and community guidelines, which are two different things. But in general, these are the two pillars on which you would base that one part of the parallel operation in screening, and then the other, misinformation, would be more specific, if I understand it correctly. So in relation to that, if we're talking about response times, and going back to the question of the representative process, I believe, so is there a pre-posting screening mechanism? Because, for example, what we've learned from ByteDance is that when you post a video, there's like this buffering, which isn't actually required to post their videos. But during that time, they're already screening it amongst, like you said, it's probably a digital bank of other prohibited content before it gets posted. So is that the same with Meta?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, we proactively screen content. Every piece of content that's posted on our platforms is going to go through some type of automated screening. Yeah. Every piece of content will go through some type of automated screening. It does not mean that our screening is perfect, and I do want to emphasize that, right? And as I kind of pointed out previously, our accuracy rates on really clear violations are very high. If we look at our proactive removal rate on, again, issues like terrorism, child exploitative imagery, we're talking above 99%, approaching 99.9%, right? When we get down to other issues that are more nuanced, that are more contextual, that are borderline, then those proactive systems, they may flag it for a human to review, right, as a next step, because it's just kind of too difficult for a machine to make that determination, right? So the review process is complex, but it involves like many different layers. The first one very much would be an automated one as a proactive measure.
Thank you for that response. So generally, the automated pre-posting screening would be very effective for those that are obviously wrong, like you have hate speech, child pornography, terrorism, and the likes. And when it comes to the nuanced parts that we have difficulty, right, which would include the point of this committee hearing, the fake news and misinformation. We understand it to be pretty difficult, and that's where, if I understand correctly, that's where the fact checkers come in. In addition to that, we came across a piece of news that Meta was actually dropping fact checkers in favor of something, I think it was community notes mechanism. Is that correct, or is that not being rolled out globally?
Mr. Chairman, so just one thing I want to point out. In the list of violations, you mentioned hate speech. hate speech sometimes can be obvious, but other times it cannot. And so that one's a little more nuanced than terrorism, for example, right? Okay, yes, turning to our global fact-checking program. As of, I believe, yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States only, we have moved to a system of community notes as opposed to our third-party fact-checking system. But everywhere else in the globe, the third-party fact-checking system is the system we still use.
Could you please enlighten us as to why the United States has dropped that fact-checking mechanism? Were there difficulties on their previous review system, and do you foresee that this difficulty would actually be the same all around the globe?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, the fact-checking system in the United States, I think what the determination by our global leadership was that we saw that it had become in some way politicized, and that they believed that there was the potential to improve on that system using the community notes system, right? Which companies like X have already developed and implemented for quite some time, which relies on many, many, many more users and many, many more diverse points of view to determine whether content is false in some way. And that system has now been implemented in the United States only. As of now, there's no plan to change that globally, but I think that I would just always say that whether it's our fact-checking system, whether it's our generative AI products, whether it's the user experience in some way, we're always looking to improve everything we do. We're always looking at innovation. And so, you know, the community notes that are now rolling out in the United States, we're obviously going to be looking at, are they effective? You know, do they make sense? And testing like the capabilities there. But as of now, and there's no plan to change the system other than in the United States.
I still have quite a few, I have a lot of questions actually, but I understand that there's a time constraint for our resource person, so I'll just stick to one or two questions to conclude. Just based on that point, I'll leave the others out. So when they drop the fact-checking, I know it doesn't apply it here, but we'd like to know the possibility of, if that were to be implemented here, we'd want to know what we're working with for our legal framework, right? What laws that we might come out with in relation to that. So if you are dropping fact-checkers and it's community-based, this would now be more in line with the reporting system that you already have. So it's going to be it's going to be based on user feedback. And how do you differentiate authentic user feedback from, for example, what we're really fighting here are the trolls? I mean, that's one thing that we can agree is very morally wrong and misleading. So when they're purporting to be other people who they're not, and they're not voicing actual, personal opinions, and they bloat their numbers per capita. Instead of just one voice, it appears to be hundreds of thousands. How do you now balance that when you drop the fact checkers?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, first of all, any type of inauthentic behavior is prohibited on our platforms. Any type. You have to be your authentic self on our platforms. And it's especially, and I would say that in the case of any kind of coordinated inauthentic behavior, that can rise to the level of what we would call network disruptions, with my colleague Rob described earlier in our presentation, and how we treat those types of abusive networks. To your question specifically about community notes, I need to be very honest. This is a very new program that we are running, and I just don't feel qualified to completely answer the question about how it works, as it's only rolled out, I believe, yesterday. I feel very qualified to answer a lot of other questions about these issues, but on that one, I think we just have to come back to the committee. If you have specific questions, I think that the chairman and the committee are putting together a list of follow-up questions, and we'll be happy to try to address that one as well.
Thank you. Just one last question to the Honorable Chairman, if there are resource persons who could oblige, because you already mentioned that in Facebook you only allow your authentic self. But anecdotally, that isn't the case. especially here in the Philippines. I don't know if it's the same outside the Philippines, but if you've been monitoring, one of the issues that we have are these massive troll farms in which people purport to be other people, and precisely to bloat out their, public, in order to shape public opinion and sentiment. So what measures do you have to ensure that? Is it possible to implement something in which, truly, not just, currently, if I understand it correctly, the closest that Meta has come to identifying authentic users would be phone numbers. By requiring phone numbers as a two-factor authentication, ideally it's 1:1, but we've passed the SIM registration bill. It's now a law. It hasn't curbed the number of SIM cards being registered to, being used by one person but registering other persons. So how do we go about it? I see Mr. Abrams doesn't agree, and I agree. It isn't the best way, but from my understanding, SIM registry, the phone numbers was being used by Meta to sort of validate whether a person is not. You have verified accounts in which you require them to submit IDs, but not everyone's verified. So what steps is Meta taking? What steps could they take to curb these inauthentic users?
Mr. Chairman, if we may. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond? Actually, I actually am agreeing with you that SIM card registration was probably the way to go. That way you're getting at the bottom of the pyramid. Over 80%, I believe, and I want to go on the record as saying that's my belief right now. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me. Over 80% of our Filipino community of users uses phone numbers to register. But to say that phone numbers are our sole way of checking for authenticity is not the case. There are many back-end engineering cues that our analysts look at to determine the authenticity of an account. To that end, that's probably what flagged the Honorable Congresswoman's a false positive, and that's why we were able to restore it as well. But to go into too much granularity as to the cues we use would give bad actors an advantage. So perhaps an executive session with your good office would be in line for a further discussion on that, Bo.
I would just if I may add, the inauthentic behavior. I think in our latest report, but again, we can go look up the exact figures. But we've used AI, for example, to remove, I think, 2 billion accounts in the last transparency report for inauthentic behavior. And so again, we can get you the exact numbers. We report those transparently. But what I would also just emphasize, and I think this is really important because I get your question is about troll farms. So I just want to address that head on. We would view that type of behavior, generally speaking, under our coordinated inauthentic behavior policy, which prohibits exactly what that sounds like. Any kind of coordination by people not being honest about who they are for the purposes of spreading misinformation, right? And we have very stringent policies on that, where not only if we find someone engaged in that kind of behavior, we don't just take down that account. We do what we call fan outs, and we investigate what other accounts that account is coordinating with. And that is what leads us to undertake much larger network disruptions of accounts that are coordinating in abusive behavior on our platform. We've undertaken, I believe, 9 different types of those actions in Philippines over the last, since 2017 or 2018, I think the numbers are. Again, these are all public. We can get them to you. And I think it's really important to point out, this is where our relationship with law enforcement really comes into play. A lot of those come from leads that we act on from law enforcement. And the intel sharing goes both ways. And so I would emphasize to you, I'd continue to emphasize to law enforcement, although they already know this, and other members of this committee, if you have reason to believe that there are accounts that are engaged in that kind of behavior on our platforms, please do send them to us. And we will do everything we can to investigate to see whether they are engaged in that kind of coordinated abusive behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, to the Honorable Chairman. Actually, if you had the time and you stuck around with us, I think you'd see through our other resource persons in questioning later on that it is, while we do appreciate that you have the guidelines and the protocols in place, doesn't seem to be all that effective. I understand the scale that you're operating, perhaps it's very difficult, but at least in the situation here in the Philippines, you'd see later on that it's very difficult. But I understand with the time constraint, I actually still have more questions, but given that we wouldn't want you to miss your flight, so I'll be yielding to the next interpolator. I'd like to thank Dr. Frankel and Mr. Abrams for their time today. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
The last interpreter on the Meta issue, Honorable Romeo Acop, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I proceed, Mr. Chair, I'd like to briefly manifest that the absence of a clearly accountable and empowered Meta entity here in the Philippines is a crucial issue. And I hope the Meta people would agree with that. As we have heard, Facebook Philippines does not control the platform, nor does it handle content regulation or policy enforcement. This makes it difficult for Filipinos to seek timely and effective recourse when harm occurs online. That is why we are exploring the idea of requiring accreditation or registration for social media platforms operating in this country to ensure that there is a readily accessible, responsible point of contact that understands and complies with our laws. It's a matter of accountability, Mr. Chair, not just for regulation, but for the protection of the Filipino people. And may I proceed, Mr. Chair? I'll touch on accountability, which was a little bit touched by the Honorable Gutierrez. May I ask, Meta, are you aware of the number of Filipinos who use Facebook and Instagram? Are you aware of the number?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, I assume you're referring to here in the Philippines or globally?
Philippines.
Yes, I think the last numbers that we've reported were over 90 million.
90 million.
Over
Filipinos.
90 million.
Okay. And would you agree that you have a responsibility to these users to keep the space you provide them free and open? You have that responsibility, would you agree?
Sorry, do we have the responsibility to keep our platforms free and open?
Yes.
Sir? I think we have the responsibility to do the best we can to balance the rights of Filipino people to free expression, but also the rights of people to have a safe space on our platforms. I believe that's what you're getting at.
Yes. And because of such, the posting of false information and misleading news, the content that harms not only the subjects of the questionable post, but also the public trust in state institutions should not be tolerated. Would you agree with that also?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Well, the answer is yes or no.
I think, Congressman.
Would you agree with that?
Congressman, when I want to answer this question carefully.
May I know why you are going to answer it carefully?
Sir, yes, absolutely, sir. I want to say that when we come to topics like misinformation, there are different interpretations of that. And this is why we rely on third-party fact checkers to be the authoritative sources of what is true or false and to make those determinations so that we, as a neutral platform and one that is committed to providing, again, the best we can do to balance freedom of expression and safety, are not the ones making the determination about what is true and false. So I believe that we have the proper system in place where we rely on third-party fact checkers that are internationally certified to be the authoritative sources on what constitutes misinformation. And from that point, we have the responsibility to act on the findings that those third-party fact checkers provide to us. And if they provide us the finding that that's false, then we do have the responsibility, and it is in our community standards, to make sure we've reduced that distribution of the content and properly labeled it, so anyone seeing that content knows that they are viewing something that is false and that they can access the authoritative source of information so that they can understand what the real situation is. And I think that that's the way that we do our best to make that proper balance of providing freedom of expression, but also safety for the people of Philippines and indeed our global community. And again, I just want to emphasize, even then we will go as far as to removing misinformation if it's clearly false and can lead to physical violence or violates elections law. Right? In those cases, we will remove it. And I think that that's the best that's the best system we've had over many years of dealing with these issues around the world, to kind of balancing to the best that we can those dueling objectives of freedom of expression and safety.
Thank you, Doctor. But my question was very simple: whether the posting of false information or misleading news content that harms not only the subjects of the questionable post should not be tolerated. It's answerable by yes or no. Should this not be tolerated by platforms? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, again, I want to just emphasize the point that people disagree. We're in a world right now when people disagree on what's true and what's not true.
Are you trying to tell this committee that you do not agree with that?
I'm trying to explain to the committee, Mr. Congressman, that the approach we have is based on remaining a neutral platform that tries our best in very difficult circumstances, in very robust democracies like the Philippines, where there are very charged political debates going on. We do our best to balance freedom of expression on the one hand and safety on the other, and that our view on the best way to do that is to rely on third parties to make the determination when it comes to true or false or somewhere in between. And we think that that's the best way forward. And Mr. Congressman, actually, I would say, I don't think you necessarily want us to be the ones that determine what's true and false. I don't think you would want us to undertake that kind of that kind of power, basically. I think that, this is, in a democratic system, this is kind of the best balance we can possibly strike when it comes to how to moderate these types of issues on our platforms in the type of context that we have in the lead up to an election, for an example. And I would just note again that we take our content moderation very seriously. We take our fact-checking program very seriously. We have 11 different channels between the government and our platforms to address any type of misinformation or other harmful content. We undertake network disruptions if we see that there's a coordinated abusive pattern when it comes to misinformation or disinformation or any type of foreign interference. And as a result of that, and I would just, again, in the last election cycle, we were given an award by Comelec for this work. And so I just have to continue to lean on that posture and on that approach as the best way that we can support the community that we have here in the Philippines.
Thank you. But as we have discussed earlier, that there are systems and controls in place to remove posts that violate community guidelines. So we can both agree that some posts do not belong on the platform.
Yes, we can absolutely agree. We can absolutely agree on that, yes.
You can agree with that already?
There are some posts that don't belong on the platform? Yes, absolutely.
And as the platform itself, you would take action to remove this post?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And
if they
therefore,
violate our community standards, we would remove them.
yes, thank you. And therefore, it's fair to say that the platform has a duty to prevent the spread of such posts because they can cause harm. Would that also be correct?
Mr. Congressman, we have a duty to act on content that violates our community standards, and in some cases, specifically if it violates local law.
No, Doctor, my point is that you have a duty to prevent the spread of such posts because they can cause harm. That's the gist of my question.
We have a duty to remove posts that we're aware of that violate our community standards, yes.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, could I say that you recognize that Meta bears some responsibility for what is shared and posted on Facebook or Instagram?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Sir, every individual user bears the ultimate responsibility for what he or she posts on our platforms. I think that it's important to underline that point.
That's a given.
That's a given, okay.
Now,
Right.
what
As
I'm
long-
asking is whether Meta bears some responsibility for what is shared and posted on Facebook and Instagram. That's my question.
Yeah, so what I would say is, we absolutely...
Do you?
Yeah, sir, if I may, we very much believe that we have a responsibility to provide a safe platform for our users around the world, including in Philippines.
That's your obligation. But my question is, would you bear some responsibility for what is shared and posted in your platforms? Yes or no? It's a very simple question.
Sir, I just want to be really clear about this again, okay? Our responsibility is to make sure that we are doing the best we can to balance between voice and safety, okay? And the ultimate
Mr. Chair,
responsibility for the people,
Chairman,
for the content posted is the
I
people
think
that post
the
it.
doctor is evading the answer to my question. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry will say that it's answerable by yes or no.
Mr. Congressman, the ultimate responsibility lies with the user who posts the
agree.
content.
But what I'm asking is if Meta bears some responsibility. I'm not asking whether you are the primordial entity to be responsible. No, I'm not asking that. My question is whether you bear some responsibility.
Mr. Congressman, if I may, I believe I've answered the question that I think the user bears the responsibility for what they post on our platform. Now, we have a set of community standards that we do our best to uphold because we want everyone to have a positive experience on our platforms and a safe experience on our platforms. And that's what our community standards are for. That's what our fact-checking programs are for. That's why we take these hearings very seriously. That's why we have the 11 different relationships with the government agencies in the Philippines so that harmful content can be reported to us. And I think that's how we do our best, like I said, to ensure that people have a voice and the freedom of expression while also a safe experience. But as I said, I think the ultimate responsibility for content lies with the user that's posted it.
Mr. Chair, the questions I would be asking would depend on the answer of Dr. Frankel insofar as whether Meta bears some responsibility, and therefore, since he has said that he cannot answer me directly, I will not ask the other questions, but may I make a manifestation, Mr. Chair? It seems from our discussion that social media platforms are making some effort to curb the spread of fake news in this country. However, I disagree with the impression that acting merely as host of user-generated content exempts these platforms from any liability for the harmful content they allow to be exhibited. As part of our legislative duties, I think it may be time to revisit the current legal framework regarding these social media platforms, if only to incentivize them to further crack down on these types of illegal posts. Now, may I go to another issue, Mr. Chair? Yes, Mr. Chair. Regarding monetization. Doctor, can you confirm whether Facebook or Instagram allows content creators in the Philippines to earn revenue directly through the platform? Yes or no?
Congressman, I believe the answer is yes, but I want to make sure to check on that. I believe we have content creators that can monetize on our platform in the Philippines, yes.
Thank you. And would this mean that Facebook directly pays users upon fulfillment of certain requirements and upon reaching specific targets? Would that be correct also?
I'm not familiar exactly with the modality of payment, but again, I believe, yes, we do provide content creators with the ability to monetize here.
Thank you. And what are the means of earning through the meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram?
I'm sorry, sir, what?
What are the means of earning through the meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram?
There's different ways. You can monetize your content using something we call stars. There's ways that we can have partnerships. I think there's 2 or 3 different ways that creators can monetize.
Thank you. And are there specific content guidelines that monetized accounts must follow?
Yes,
And if so,
absolutely.
how are these enforced in our country or in the Philippines?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So there are content guidelines.
Creators, like anyone else, must abide by our community standards.
Now, is there a process also for demonetizing content that is later found to be false, misleading, harmful, or otherwise violative of the community guidelines?
Any user that is monetizing on our platform can be demonetized if they have repeated violations of our community standards, including repeated violations of misinformation. Yeah.
No. Can you describe to this committee the revenue sharing model? How much of the ad revenue goes to Facebook, and how much goes to the content creator?
Sir, I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm happy to provide that if we can take that under question to come back to the committee.
And who would be the proper authority from your group to answer that question?
We can come back to you on that. There's a few questions I think that we're going to put together as part of the follow-up to this, and we can happily add that as one of them.
Thank you. Now, my last question. How does Facebook ensure that creators don't exploit the algorithm by posting inflammatory or misleading content just to gain more views and earnings?
Mr. Chairman, again, if I may, as you pointed out, sir, we have policies that will demonetize pages if they engage in repeated violations of our community standards or if they engage in repeated instances of misinformation.
For curiosity's sake, can you provide data available on how much content creators in the Philippines have earned through Facebook's monetization programs over the past years?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I do not have that data.
And who would have that?
Again, we can take that question under advisement and see if we can come back with something, but that may also be subject to privacy, and so I would have to see what the exact question is and see if we can come back to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, for a last manifestation, you're given 5 minutes. Honorable Abante.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I really would like to ask some questions, but I'm not going to ask any questions anymore. But as I listen to your explanation, I begin to realize, and I don't understand what meta actually is. All right? I have to admit I'm ignorant of what you're trying to do. But I would think, Mr. Chair, that meta is a regulatory agency because you have community standards. Content and accounts that violate our community standards, including harmful misinformation, and you remove it. And you're not telling us that you have, in a way, a responsibility to do it. You have, because you are a self-regulatory agency of your company, of Facebook. Now, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask if Meta could be able to provide us a data of whatever your community standards are, because we don't even know. We'd like you to give us a data of what you mean by harmful this misinformation. I'm not going to ask this question anymore because I know you're going to answer us with a lengthy statement, but just give us a data. What do you mean? Guidelines. What do you mean by community standards? What do you mean by harmful misinformations? Just give us the guidelines for that. Can you do that, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, our community standards are publicly published and available on
Mr. Chair, I'm asking that you give us the data. Not being able to see it on public. We would like to ask you to give us the data.
Anyway,
give us the guidelines for your community standards.
there are many requests as per interpellation from the different congressmen. So we will incorporate all these requests, requesting data,
Thank you.
Including your
Guidelines.
request regarding the community's standard guidelines. There was a request also from Arlene Brosas. So we will incorporate this on our official communication, and hopefully you'll also to give us the feedback.
Just one thing, Mr. Chair. Comparing the Philippines to different countries, do we have more misinformation here and violation of community standards? Do we have more of that than any country in the world? Do we have more?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, I think that I would have to go back and look at the statistics, but we publish our transparency report on community standards enforcement every 6 months. And our fact checks, again, are also very transparent. That information is publicly available, as is our community standards. All the information that you've just requested is publicly available information. So, Rob,
Thank
if you
you.
want to add
Thank you.
anything?
You're asking, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, you're asking, obviously, Congressman Abante, a very important set of questions. The first thing I would say is just to reiterate, our community standards are readily available online. Number two, they're iterative. So in our consultations with your government and many others, they're revised with a lot of regularity. A lot of what we do is self-regulation, to be fair. But here in the Philippines, sir, if I may, we not only consulted with, we agreed to lots of legislation that has placed on us turnaround time burdens when it comes to certain types of harmful content, data disclosure burdens, not burdens, but obligations that we've agreed to, and we're beating turnaround times. We are largely compliant with data requests. I would hope, and I wouldn't dare speak for the law enforcement community here, but I would hope that they would agree that we are amongst, if not the most forward-leaning when it comes to protecting our Filipino community of users. And I absolutely think I understand that we're in the middle of an election cycle. Things are heated here at the moment, but that does not distract me or my team from our constant, everyday work in battling off-platform harm for our users. And not everything we do is self-regulating. We do a lot to follow local law. And reasonable people like myself in your good office, we're going to have disagreements along the way. I think the point is to keep these dialogues open. So with that, I do want to genuinely thank Congress for allowing us to be here today. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just emphasize, Mr. Chairman, we heard a lot of questions today, and very good questions, very fair questions. I hope that the answers we provided in the presentation were educational, informational, and I hope that we demonstrated, as Rob just pointed out, the very strong collaboration we've had with many different parts of the government, different administrations, Congress, on developing regulation and laws, implementing them, living up to our legal obligations here in Philippines, and again, being a platform that is a positive social net good for Philippines, because it helps people build their businesses. It helps the economy grow. It helps people connect to their loved ones for free. It helps people learn about the world and gain new skills. And of course, with the election coming, we're absolutely determined to protect the integrity of the election on our platforms. And I hope that we can have more of these conversations. Congressman, we're very happy to sit down and collaborate on additional regulation if you feel it's necessary. There's a number of different examples of how we've worked with Congress over the years. Most recently, for example, on the Internet Transactions Act. There's also the digital VAT. I mean, these are just two very recent examples of collaborations we've had on law and regulation here in the Philippines with Congress and with the administration, and absolutely happy to continue that. And I do hope, as Rob said, that our responsiveness to the government and Filipino community's concerns has come out clearly today, and we remain very determined to be a great partner to the people, businesses, and the government of Philippines in the future. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to present this today and to speak to the committee and the people of the Philippines.
Mr. Chair, thank you for your statement, Dr. Frankel and Mr. Abrams. This is the very reason why we have this hearing, so we could be able to craft laws about what is happening right now. I'm so glad you said that you be compliant to every legal thing we have in this country. And thank you very much for that. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to assure Dr. Frankel that Mr. Abrams that we will, in my own capacity, talk to you about many of these things. Thank you very much.
Actually, we still have many questions to Meta, but unfortunately, because of time constraints, we cannot do so. So in behalf of the committee, Dr. Frankel, Mr. Abrams, we would like to thank you for attending the hearing. You are now excused. It's already 1 p.m. You go direct to the airport. You might miss your flight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
The chair acknowledges the presence of Senior Deputy Speaker Aurelio Dong Gonzales, Honorable Ernesto Junicio Jr., and present online, Honorable Arjo Ataide, Honorable Jonathan Flores. We have 5 issues to be discussed in today's hearing. 1, social media platforms. 2, celebrities. 3, testimony from Commodore Tariela. 4, testimonies from social media influencers. And the last one is testimonies from government agencies. So for celebrities, may I understand Kabayan Noli de Castro is present, so may I request the COMSEC to invite Mr. Noli de Castro? COMSEC, pwedeng maimbita natin si Mr. Noli de Castro so that we will have an orderly hearing and a smooth flow of discussion. We will tackle the issues as mentioned earlier by the chair one by one. COMSEC, I understand, I was informed earlier that Mr. Noli de Castro is in the holding room.
Yes, sir. He's on his way.
Okay. Can we invite them? Comsec, paki-escort lang sa upuan si Mr. Noli de Castro. Thank you, Kabayan Noli, for attending the hearing. We will give you an opportunity if you would like to make an opening statement.
Good afternoon po, Mr. Chairman, and mga membro ng committee, at ang ating mga invited guests. Kanina po nanonood ako doon sa loob ng hearing ho ninyo. At sinusuportahan ko po itong initiative ninyo na labanan ng mga fake news. Kasama ho kami dyan. Yung mga misinformation at saka disinformation. Kasama na rito po ang deepfake. Naging biktima rin ho ako niyan. Marami sa aming mga broadcaster. Bunso din po ng Gen AI at ang iba pa mga advanced technology po ngayon. Hindi natin mapipigilan ho yan. Kanina, I'm sorry, hindi ninyo napag-usapan sa Meta yung advanced ng technology. Kasi hindi ho talaga mapipigilan. Yung pinsala na dulot nito ay hindi lamang po sa aming mga personalidad and even to you, Congressman, kundi pa sa pangkalatan sa publiko na nakababasa, nakakita at nakakapanood po nito. Kailangan ng sabayang pagkilos para sa education ng publiko at sa aming media practitioners para mamulat to ang mas nakararami tungkol sa masamang epekto ng fake news sa ating bansa at sa demokrasya. Kami ho sa media ay alam ko malaki rin ang responsibility sapagkat mas mabilis kaming ma-check ang mga fake news. At the same time, ma-check kaagad namin ang fake news. Although sana po ay naka-ready din ang mga government agencies na sagutin yung mga lumalabas na fake news. Especially sa mga congressman din po. Thank you. Thank you po.
Thank you, Mr. Noli de Castro. As per our House rules po, all resource persons will have to take their oath. So, can you please rise? Comsec, please administer the oath. Comsec, please administer the oath.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this inquiry?
Before we proceed with
Thank you,
interpellation,
Mr.
the Chair acknowledges Honorable Geraldine Roman. The first to interpellate, Representative Kunghon. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Magandang hapon po, former Vice President Noli de Castro.
Good afternoon po.
Gaya nga po ng sabi ng ating chairman, ni Kong Johnny Pimentel, ang peking balita ay walang sinasanto. Lahat nabibiktima, lahat pwedeng maapektuhan. At bilang public personalities, isa sa madalas na nagiging biktima ng fake news ay ating mga local celebrities at sikat na media personnel. Mula sa peking iskandalo hanggang sa maling impormasyon, lagi silang nadadamay ng di makatarungang paghuhusga. Dahil dito, may inimbita tayong mga ilang sikat na media personality para magpahayag ng kanilang karanasan bilang nabibiktima ng fake news. Mr. Vice President, I think it's fair to say na madalas po kayong nagiging subject ng fake news. Tama po ba?
Opo.
At dahil din po dito, nagkaroon po kayo ng pampublikong hinaing regarding sa mga fake news, lalong-lalo na nung nakaraang linggo. Tama po ba?
Opo, opo.
At base sa preliminary research na isinagawa po natin, isa sa mga peking balita na kumakalat tungkol sa iyo ay ang nausong quote card na pagkatapos na pagka-aresto
ng dating Presidente Rodrigo Duterte, kung saan sinabi mo daw na the former President Rodrigo Duterte, Tatay Digong, did not start the war to kill. He started, nasa ano po yan, meron po tayong, pwede po bang pakilabas? Yan po ba? Tama po ba ito yung isa sa mga code card na bigay po sa inyong kaalaman na peke na sinabi niyo raw po ba? Sinabi niyo raw po, tama po ba?
Medyo hindi yata ho masyadong malinaw ho ito, Mr. Chairman, tungkol dito.
Ang nakalagay po doon, sir, is former President Rodrigo Duterte did not start the war to kill.
Okay.
He started to save lives. He gave drug addicts a chance to change, to surrender, to choose a better life. But many refused. They kept using, kept selling, kept killing innocent people. So what a leader should do, let criminals destroy families or take actions to stop them. One addict lost is tragic, but thousands of innocent lives saved, that is justice. Duterte made the streets safe. Yan po yung mga nakalagay sa quote card na na-attribute po sa inyo.
Opo. Pero hindi ho lahat totoo eh. Kaya kami ho, fortunately, kami sa media, sa mga broadcaster, nakokorek kaagad ho namin on the air. On the air. Once na lumabas yung fake news, nakokorek kaagad namin. In my case, meron po akong IG na ginagawang ko kagad doon ng word na malaki na in bold letter na fake. Tapos nakikiusap po ako sa aking mga kaibigan na may Facebook din, may IG, and other form na ipakalat naman nila na yung lumabas na ba na news item ay fake. Yun ang mga ginagawa ko para mabilis na nakakakalat yung information na that item ay fake.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, nakikita niyo po ba yung nakalagay sa screen natin ngayon?
Opo.
Ito po ay galing kay ito po ay pinost, no? Ni JM, di ko alam kung paano i-pronounce itong Almine o Almine o Almine. Ayan, JM Almine. Nakalagay po dito, sabi niyo raw po na di ko binoto si PRRD dahil gustong-gusto ko talaga si VP Lenny.
Aha.
Familiar po ba kayo sa napabalita ang sinabi niyo daw po?
Opo. Alam ko ho, fake ito. Kaya gumawa kaagad ho ako ng version ko at nilagyan ko ng in bold letter na fake.
Mr. Vice President, kilala niyo po ba si JM Almine?
Hindi po. Hindi ko po siya kilala.
Sinubukan niyo po bang kilalanin kung sino yung nag-post nito?
Hindi na po dahil baka mamaya hindi tunay na tao ito eh. Uso ho ngayon yun.
Ano po ang naging reaksyon niyo na nakita niyo yung post na ito?
Well, sanay na ho ako sa mga lumalabas na ganito eh. So ang first reaction ko ay gumawa ng paraan para may pakalat ko na fake nga ito. Lagyan ng bold letter na fake. Kuminsan ginagawa ko pa ay naka-flash yung fake. At makiusap sa mga kakilala ko na may mga Facebook, IG at iba pa, na ipakalat din nila para marami po makabasa.
Nung nakita niyo po ito, ano po yung personal na naramdaman ninyo? Dahil karamihan po sa nakabasa nito, naniniwala na sinabi niyo raw po ito.
Well, of course, ang iba maniniwala ho, lalo na kung hindi ako kilala. Pero sa newscast, nako-correct naman ho namin ito eh. Itong ganito. Kaya madali lang ho eh. Hindi ho ako masyadong naapektuhan kapag ganito. Maswerte lang ho kami dahil mga broadcaster ho kami. But kung pag-uusapan ho yung pangkaraniwang tao, yun ang madaling maapektuhan. At wala silang means, wala silang source para makorek agad yung lumabas na fake news.
Mr. Vice President, pagkatapos po kumalat itong mga fake na quote card na ito, madaming organisasyon ang nag-post at nag-fact check din ng balita na ito. Alam niyo ba kung ano-ano yung mga organisasyon na ito tulad ng ABS-CBN Fact Check,
Opo, meron po
Verifies,
kami ganon.
etc.?
Opo, meron po kami ganon. Ang ABS-CBN may fact check at inilalabas po namin yan sa TV Patrol. Yung mga fina-fact check po namin.
Sa inyong personal na opinion po, Mr. Vice President, nakakatulong ba sa pagtigil at pagkalat ng fake news ang pagpa-fact check ng ABS-CBN, Rappler, Verifies? Nakakatulong po ba ito?
Well, nakakatulong ho, pero hindi ko alam kung ilang porsyentong naitutulong nito. Pero nakakatulong ho. Definitely.
Thank you. Sir, isa na naman pong balita na kumalat sa inyo ay yung pagkakadulas ninyo. Naalala niyo po ba ito noong 2021?
Dadulas.
Meron pong fake news na kumalat noon, yung pagkakadulas ninyo, pagkakoma at pagkamatay umano.
Oh.
Noong October 26, 2021.
Opo.
Naalala niyo po ba ito?
Opo.
Kung saan kayo po ay nag-post katabi ng inyong koi pond ng magandang umaga bayan, pagpalain sana po ng Diyos ang inyong umaga, mga kabayan. Naalala niyo po ba yun? Kasunod po nito, yan po yun, kabayan, nasa screen po natin. Kasunod po nito ay nag-post kayo ng isang video na may caption, miss ko na po kayo mga kabayan, abangan.
Opo.
Naalala niyo rin po yun. Pati po ang inyong anak na si Madam Kat de Castro ay nangangailangan pa mag-post upang patunayan na ang balita na yon ay fake news din sa inyong pagkamatay. Kaya ang sabi niya, "Hi everyone, my dad's absolutely fine. We just had dinner." Ang post ni Madam Kat de Castro.
Opo.
Ano po ang inyong reaksyon nung nakita niyo na may kumalat na kayo ay pumanaw na?
Well, sabi nga ho nila, kapag kayo nabalita na patay na kayo, ay masahaba ang buhay nyo. But isa pa ho, sabi ho namin, kami mga personalities, bad news or good news ay publicity pa rin ho. Kaya kung may ganyan, ay pag-uusapan pa rin kayo. Pero may mga news naman na medyo masakit na. Lalo kung affected ang ating bansa, Kung ako lang, okay lang 'yon. Pero pag affected na ho ang bansa, iba na 'yon.
Mr. Vice President, yung mga tao sa paligid nyo, yung pamilya nyo, naapektuhan ba sa fake news na ito?
Medyo ho, mas una silang naapektuhan kapag may mga fake news na involvo ako.
Naniwala ba sila agad nung nakita nila yung balita na yan?
Ay hindi ho, dahil alam mo naman nila ang nangyayari ho sa akin. Kaya hindi sila naniniwala kaagad. Kaya lang, nag-worry lang sila.
Sir, yung mga taong hindi mo naman personal na kilala, tulad ng karamihan na yung mga viewers, na yung mga fans at supporters, ano ang naging reaksyon nila sa balita na yan?
Well, ang nababasa ko lang ho, hindi rin sila naniniwala. Yung iba naman ay nagko-condolence na, no? Lumabas ng balita na ako'y patay na. So, sinasagot ko sila, hindi ho, buhay pa ho ako. Yung mga ganon.
Sir, sinubukan niyo po bang alamin kung sino yung nagpalaganap ng fake news na ito?
Gusto ko ho lang alamin, pero wala akong means na alamin kung paano Kung ang meta nga, walang masyadong means para alamin Napansin ko kanina sa tanong nila, Congressman Gutierrez
Sir, ni-report niyo po ba yung fake news na ito? I mean sa Facebook, sa Meta?
Hindi na po. Hindi na po. Lately ko lang nalaman na kinakailangan pa palang i-report mo para umaksyon mo sila. Kailangan pang i-report.
Actually, pagkatapos nung kumalat na kayo ay pumanaw na, marami din po ang nag-fact check, no? Na organisasyon para siguraduhin na may tama yung kumakalat sa inyo na balita na kayo ay pumanaw na. Paano naman po yung mga social media website, no, Mr. Vice President, kung saan kumalat yung mga post na ito, may mga gumawa ba sila na paraan para matigil o matulungan kayo para i-correct, no? Yung mga ganitong klaseng fake news. Meron po bang mga tumulong na mga website? May mga tumulong po bang mga individual para kayo'y matulungan na pagsawata itong mga fake news na kumakalat sa inyo?
Again, may minso kami para maharang kaagad yung mga fake news na yan because nakikita nila ako sa television na nagbabalita pa rin ng live. So that means yun ang patunay na hey, buhay pa pala si Kabayan eh. Nagbabalita pa ng live. Yun ang sinasabi ko na kami maswerte pa ng katulad namin personality. But ang kawawa ay yung walang means para maharang kaagad nila mga fake news na lumalabas against them.
Kanina tinanong po ni Congressman Acop kung may responsibilidad ba ang Meta at Facebook sa mga ganitong klaseng kumakalat na fake news. Tingin niyo po ba, Kabayan, merong responsibilidad ang Facebook at Meta sa mga ganitong klaseng fake news na lumalabas at nakakaapekto, lalong-lalo na sa buhay ng mamamayan?
Opo, naniniwala po ako dun. At naniniwala din akong negosyo ito eh. Pati na po sa mga vlogger, kaya ko sila naingganyong mag-vlog, ay dahilan sa kumikita rin sila. Aminin natin, huwag na tayo maging hipokrito dito. Pati ang Meta, alam naman nila yon, negosyo nila yon eh.
So, tingin niyo po, hindi lang sa content creator o nag-post ang sole responsibility pagdating din po sa mga post na pinopost nila, pati rin po ang Meta.
Opo.
Meron tingin niyo, meron din pong responsibilidad.
Yes
patungkol
po.
sa mga post na ilalagay sa kanilang platform.
Mahalaga po yun. Dahil silang means eh, para may pakalat yun eh. Wala namang iba. Sila rin kung Facebook, kalimbawa, Facebook lang ang magpapakalat niya, wala nang iba. Facebook to Facebook, yung may mga Facebook. So, naniniwala ako na ang Meta ay malaki ang responsibilidad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Re-reserve ko po yung aking mga katanungan sa susunod na round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Vice
Are
President.
there any other members who would like to ask questions to the former Vice President De Castro? I understand Honorable Roman is inclined to ask questions. May we know from any... Nagpalista po si si General Honorable Roman. But it seems that...
Lumabas.
Dito po.